Avenojus danced and sang a traditional song about his homeland. The Dionians joined in the rhythm. Avenojus felt his years of caution and burden lift. He received prolonged applause. Scombros stood up to sing a hymn to Zeus in response. Days earlier, Sensing had been ecstatic after defeating Lazo and seizing Gramentum, positioning himself as the new Lacanian hegemon. Reality soon set in. Sensing was too stingy to distribute spoils or land to the tribes that betrayed Lazo, favoring his own Picos' followers instead. The Gramentum tribes revolted, seizing the north of the city and threatening to expel him. Sensing's attempts to bribe them failed. Then, worse news arrived. Nerulum had fallen. Refugees claimed countless Greek soldiers had taken the city. Sensing was stunned. He sent scouts, doubting the report, as no Lacanian town had ever been conquered by outsiders. Scouts confirmed Nerulum was now ruled by me and the Dionian League. Terrified, Sensing considered fleeing to Picos. He tried to compromise with the Gramentum tribes, but they demanded he withdraw from their city. Refusing to lose his hard-won prize, Sensing decided to summon more reinforcements from Picos to crush the internal rebellion. As he prepared to send a messenger, a guard announced an envoy from Nerulum. Sensing hesitated, then agreed to see him. Hemon entered the hall. Sensing asked, "Is it true the Greeks took Nerulum?" Hemon replied, "Nerulum belongs to the Dionian League, and Laos is now their ally." The news caused panic among the tribal leaders. "What do we do? Without Laos, the Greeks will attack us." Sensing, fearing for his position, turned his terror into rage. "Traitor, you surrendered to our enemy." Hemon countered, "I am a citizen of the Dionian League. We keep our customs, sacrifice to our gods, and enjoy more freedom, land, and wealth with lower taxes." The leaders were skeptical. Greeks are that kind to Lacanians? Hemon cited the example of the Melino tribe leaders, who were now Dionian senators. Empty, Sensing roared, "Kill him." Hemon stood firm. "Kill me, and I will be at your gates tomorrow. I protect my citizens fiercely." Sensing hesitated and ordered, "Throw him out." Hemon smiled. "Don't you want to hear the good news?" The leaders demanded, "What news?" Hemon declared, "I am here to discuss the possibility of peace between the League and your cities." The leaders argued, relieved that an immediate war might be avoided, though suspicious of the Greeks' true intentions. Hemon laughed at the Picos, mocking their fear of the Lacanians. He argued that the Dionian League only occupied Nerulum to block the Lacanians' constant southward incursions into Thurii, noting that the Greeks had no interest in the barren, mountainous Lacanian interior. The chieftains fell silent, conceding the point. Sensing asked if the Greeks truly intended to negotiate, to which Hemon retorted, "Of course, why else would I be here?" Sensing relaxed, leaning back and asking, "Is Nerulum in such chaos that you fear I might attack?" "You have that backward, great chieftain," Hemon sneered. Sensing coughed awkwardly and asked to hear the Dionian League's terms. Both sides desired peace, and negotiations proceeded smoothly. An agreement was reached. The Dionian League and the Picos-Gramentum alliance would respect a border at the mountain pass between two rivers, with a shared market. The League agreed not to support Picos' enemies, and Picos would not intercept tribes or wanderers fleeing to Nerulum. The treaty was set for 1 year. Hemon rejected Sensing's request for 5 years, stating that the League needed to verify Picos' trustworthiness before extending the term. Sensing accepted, needing peace to consolidate power against Gramentum and Potentia. Meanwhile, Avenojus of Laos agreed with the League to build a road connecting Thurii, Nerulum, and Laos. I declined Avenojus's offer to fund the entire project, insisting on splitting the costs. Laos stipulated that the League must not grant citizenship to any Laos people entering their territory and must return them upon request. In the southern Peloponnese lies Lacedaemon, or Laconia, a region guarded by the sea and the rugged Taygetos Mountains. The Eurotas River flows through its plains, past the tomb of Helen of Troy, to the unwalled city of Sparta. Sparta is a quiet, rustic city. Devoid of bustling markets or theater, its citizens follow a rigid routine. Helots farm, housewives manage homes, and men focus on military training and state affairs. The Gerousia and the Ephorate were both addressing Asia Minor affairs. The Ephorate, finding Thybron guilty of dereliction of duty regarding Clearchus, sentenced him to a fine and exile, ignoring any potential pleas. Thybron was expelled from Sparta. At the Gerousia, King Agesilaus attended in place of the ailing King Pausanias. The council first addressed the aftermath of the Elis conflict. Elis, once a Spartan ally, had defected to Athens and insulted King Agis. After a series of invasions and raids by Agis, the city was weakened by internal riots and fear, though Agis refrained from total conquest due to the city's ancient status. Agis withdrew his forces and fell ill shortly after. The elders decided to force Elis to grant independence to several towns, further weakening them. If Elis complied, they would retain the right to host the Olympic Games and manage the Temple of Zeus. Sparta refused to return these rights to Pisa, citing Pisa's historical resentment and their alliance with Sparta's enemy, Argos. Lysander then raised the issue of Clearchus's report from Ephesus, urging the Ephorate to act. An elder grumbled about the Ephorate's increasing arrogance in directing the Gerousia. King Pausanias remarked dryly, "That is only because they have Lysander's support." Lysander ignored him. The tension between Pausanias and Lysander silenced the room. Elder Diopethes asked about the Thua alliance mentioned in the report. Lysander explained it was the Thurii-Amyndalara alliance, reminding the elders of the Thurii envoy who had sought aid a year prior. Elder Lysippus recalled that while they refused military aid, they allowed Thurii to recruit mercenaries out of pity for their struggle against indigenous tribes. The elders agreed. Lysander explained that these mercenaries had helped Thurii reclaim Amendalara and were led by me, now the Archon for life. Agesilaus recalled Clearchus describing me as a military genius and wishing to bring me to Sparta. Diopethes scoffed at the term military genius. Lysippus added that Spartans believe only in rigorous training and experience, not innate genius. Agesilaus humbly agreed. Lysander recounted how I defeated Croton and formed the current alliance. An elder expressed surprise at my capability. Lysippus warned that my ambition might mirror that of Dionysius, aiming to become a tyrant of Magna Graecia. Diopethes argued that the Thua alliance was clearly inciting mercenaries in Ephesus to desert and join them in Magna Graecia. Another elder suggested they not jump to conclusions. Diopethes insisted it was a deliberate plot. Lysander concluded that if the events were linked, Sparta would simply declare it the work of the Thua alliance. The elders agreed with Lysander's hardline approach. Pausanias remained silent, privately noting the irony of Lysander invoking Spartan tradition. The Senate agreed to condemn the Thua alliance, demanding compensation for Sparta's losses and the return of the defecting mercenaries. Lysander added, "Since I am a capable commander, force me to join Dercylidas's army to fight the Persians." Diopethes and other senators approved, viewing it as punishment for disrupting Spartan operations in Asia Minor. As the senators debated, Agesilaus asked, "What if the Thua alliance refuses?" Diopethes blurted out that it would mean war, then immediately realized the strategic implications. Pausanias noted that with the Persian War and the need to suppress restless Peloponnesian states like Elis, Sparta lacked the resources for a distant conflict. Another senator warned that antagonizing Magna Graecia, a region with historically good relations, would be unwise. Diopethes angrily demanded they not tolerate the insult to Spartan authority. Lysander suggested that if the alliance refused, they could rely on Syracuse. The senators, realizing the value of a friendly power in the Western Mediterranean, shifted focus to selecting an envoy. Agesilaus volunteered, curious about this me mentioned by Clearchus. Diopethes mocked Agesilaus' limp, suggesting he was unfit to represent Sparta. Agesilaus remained calm, his spirit hardened by years of such prejudice. Lysander intervened, stating that a minor alliance like the Thua was not worth the presence of a Spartan royal. Lysander's words effectively barred Agesilaus from the mission. Lysander proposed Phoebidas as the envoy. A senator protested, citing Phoebidas' volatile and impulsive nature. Lysander insisted that a heavy-handed envoy was necessary to force the alliance's submission. The Senate ultimately confirmed Phoebidas as the envoy. After the meeting, Lysander confronted Agesilaus about his potential resentment. Agesilaus smiled, guessing Lysander's true motive involved King Agis. Lysander whispered that with Agis dying, Agesilaus needed to stay to prevent the bastard Leotychides from seizing the throne. Agesilaus thanked him solemnly. Lysander felt satisfied with his influence over the compliant Agesilaus, unaware that Pausanias was watching them with suspicion. Pausanias pointed out the suspiciously close relationship between the reformer Lysander and Agesilaus to Diopithes. Diopithes, determined to ensure Leotychides' succession despite rumors, asked for Pausanias' help. He requested that Pausanias use his royal privilege to secure a favorable oracle from Delphi, which only the descendants of Heracles could interpret. Diopithes looked at him expectantly. Pausanias agreed, vowing to thwart Lysander's ambitions. By November, despite the season, Mediterranean trade routes remained busy. Timasian, Xanthoparis, Cleaner, and their group arrived in the Gulf of Taranto. Agathias pointed toward the coast, excitedly announcing their arrival at Thurii. The group gathered at the rail to look. They soon spotted the bustling harbor, crowded with ships like a wooden wall. Xanthoparis marveled at the scale, while Agathias noted significant harbor expansions and new breakwaters built during his month-long absence. A patrol boat intercepted them. Agathias identified himself as a senator of the Thua alliance, impressing the mercenaries. The patrol captain, Middleades, recognized the senator and saluted respectfully. Agathias explained he had been away in Ephesus since September. Middleades informed him that the alliance had been renamed the Daunius City-State Alliance. Agathias was stunned and demanded to know why. With the capture of Nerulum, the Thurii-Amandalura alliance is outdated. Laos has also joined us. Lord Davos has kept his promise. We are safe from the Lacanians, Middleades exclaimed excitedly. Agathias was stunned. In his month-long absence, the alliance had expanded and renamed itself. He wanted to enter the city, but a patrol boat blocked his path. Sir, the alliance is holding a triumph in Thurii for the returning soldiers. To ensure safety, no ships may enter the Crathis River. You must disembark at the port, the officer warned, eyeing the mercenaries behind Agathias. Also, only citizens, reserved citizens, and invited guests may enter the city for the ceremony. Foreigners and freemen must remain outside. Though disappointed, Agathias understood the security measures. Thank you. I will head to the port. Has the triumph begun? He asked. Not yet. You'll make it. As the patrol left, the mercenaries swarmed Agathias. You weren't lying. You're a noble now. When can we be like you? Congratulations on the new city. How strong is your Dionian League in Magna Graecia now? Timasian asked. I felt a surge of vanity. We hold Thurii, Amandalura, and now Nerulum, plus the allied cities of Laos and Castron. Thurii alone has more fertile land than Attica. We have vast tracts of empty land. With enough citizens, our power will be unmatched in Magna Graecia. Then let's go see Davos, the group urged. The merchant ship docked as directed. Upon leaving the port, a patrol stopped them. The mercenaries were heavily armed, which was deemed a security risk during the triumph. Even with my status as a senator, they were forced to store their weapons before entering Alliance territory. Grumbling, the men complied. I explained. The Alliance has few citizens and many incoming freemen. Strict laws are necessary to prevent chaos. While some grumbled, leaders like Timasian, Cleaner, and Xanthoparis remained silent. I had warned them of the strict laws, but they hadn't taken me seriously until now. Seeing that even a senator's guarantee couldn't bypass the rules, they finally realized the severity of the Alliance's discipline. They had forgotten that as mercenaries, they were rarely even allowed inside other city-states. The port had expanded significantly, with new docks, buildings, and a fortified wall manned by soldiers. My group had to pass through a checkpoint. The sentries carefully questioned and registered them before allowing passage. Timasian frowned. Agathias, your rules are strict. We're fine, but our brothers arriving later might have trouble. Don't worry, I'll come here daily to meet them, I promised. The others agreed to join me in welcoming their comrades. The Thurii market had grown, surrounded by new workshops, inns, and taverns. Despite the expansion, it felt unusually quiet today. Outside the market, carriage drivers approached them. Going to the triumph? It's starting. Take a carriage. At 1 obol per person, the mercenaries decided to enjoy the ride. As they sped along the smooth road, a massive roar of sound erupted ahead. Outside Thurii, a sea of people cheered. They're here. They're here. A golden dragon of troops marched toward the morning sun. Lazarus, the lead flag-bearer, beamed with pride, holding the standard of Hades high. The cheers felt like medicine, filling him with strength. Temasian squinted at the bronze statue of Hades on the banner, recalling rumors that Davos was God-favored. Seeing the First Legion banner with its 4 golden stars, the mercenaries were left in awe as I explained its significance. Behind the Legion flag came the 2nd Battalion, 1st Century, banner, featuring a Grim Reaper. I had granted them this honor for their service at the Law River Fortress, while the Lacanians were given the Legion flag-bearer role to balance the honors. The soldiers marched with vigor. Your soldiers have great spirit, Xanthoparis noted. Still worse than us, Cleaner retorted. Tormid suddenly gasped. Look, those soldiers aren't Greek. I looked at the next unit's banner. 1st Legion, 4th Battalion. Realizing these were Lacanians who had likely become citizens after the conquest of Nerulum, I understood my strategy. Empty, foreigners can become citizens, Xanthoparis exclaimed. I replied, we are more open than other city-states. Even the Persian merchant Maligi is now a senator and a high-ranking trade officer. Wow, someone joked. If a Persian can be a senator, shouldn't we, who fought alongside you, be senators too? Others echoed the sentiment. I struggled to respond, but a driver named Sorikos interjected. Don't talk nonsense. Becoming a senator requires years of service, taxes, military duty, and a clean record. Maligi earned his place through trade, and the Lucanians Bagul and Wyzaba helped pacify Nerulum. What have you done for the alliance? The mercenaries were silenced. If you want to stay, be realistic and aim for citizenship first, Sorikos advised. A mercenary named Tuolakizi snapped at the old man, nearly causing a brawl. I and the leaders intervened to calm the situation, narrowly avoiding the patrol's notice. Sorikos and the drivers took their fare and left. If these men stay long, the patrols will have a headache, Sorikos muttered. Temasian whispered to me, is it really that hard to become a senator? I nodded silently. If we knew you'd have such status, we would have followed you from Byzantium. Xanthoparis sighed. Fate is cruel. We'll settle for citizenship and land. We were freer in Asia Minor. Why come here to be constrained? Cleaner complained. I remained silent, watching the parade. The 4th Battalion soldiers, though less disciplined, were physically imposing. These Lacanians, basking in the cheers, shed their inferiority complex and waved to the crowd. Behind them came wagons overflowing with gold, silver, and jewelry seized from Nerulum and Laos. The crowd gasped at the glittering wealth, kept in check only by the guards. War brought both death and riches. I was demonstrating this clearly to the Senate and the people. Do you have to surrender all loot? Temasian asked. Most goes to the treasury for pensions and equipment. No private hoarding is allowed, I replied. No loot. Then where is the passion for battle? Cleaner grumbled. I snapped. They are citizens protecting their own land. The funds support the wounded and the families of the dead. Do we have such benefits as mercenaries? Think of our brothers who died in foreign lands with no one to bury them. Cleaner fell silent. The others were deeply moved. Tormid pointed. Look, who is that? 5 carriages followed. In the first stood Felicius, his armor gleaming, looking serious as he waved to the crowd. Felicius! It's Felicius! The mercenaries cheered. The crowd roared, Felicius! Hero of the Alliance. Felicius finally managed a smile, waving to his admirers. Next was Dracos, commander of the 2nd Battalion, a former mercenary who had risen through the ranks. Then came Hieronymus. The mercenaries were stunned. Hieronymus, once a disgraced officer they had mocked for following a younger man, was now a pillar of the alliance. Behind him was Bagul, the Lacanian commander, feeling proud yet anxious. He hoped his presence would inspire other Lacanians to serve the alliance. Finally, Epitines appeared. The mercenaries knew him well. He waved with practiced ease, drawing cheers from the women in the crowd, unaware of his true preferences. Seeing their former comrades in such high positions, while they remained wandering mercenaries, left Temasian and the others with a bitter sense of loss. As the Legion flag entered the north gate, flower petals rained down on the soldiers, adding a touch of romance to their martial glory. Empty, The streets were packed with families cheering for their husbands and fathers, giving the soldiers a true hero's welcome. Felicius spotted his daughter, Melisanda, cheering from a rooftop as the army passed. Seeing her and Delia's smiles, he felt a genuine warmth. The parade turned toward a massive white marble triumphal arch. Though intended to feature reliefs of the battles at Nerulum, Laos, and Croton, the arch remained blank due to time constraints. Beyond the arch, the road widened toward a newly constructed, yet unnamed plaza. Lysum, carrying the military standard, quickened his pace upon seeing the white-robed figures of I and the Senate waiting on the platform. "They're here," Henipolis shouted with excitement. Avenogis calmed his son and thanked me for hosting the boy in my own home during his stay in Thurii. I smiled, praising Henipolis's diligence and noting how his presence had enlivened my household. Avenogis, deeply grateful for the care shown to his son, resolved to repay my kindness, then gestured to the approaching troops. "They are the guardians of our entire alliance," I remarked. Amicles, chief general of Castron, nodded in agreement, pleased to be invited to witness the spectacle. The onlookers saw the marching army not as a display of tyranny, but as a source of security. Unlike the exploitative Delian League or the interventionist Spartan-led Peloponnesian League, the Dionian alliance operated on mutual equality. I watched the parade, reflecting on my strategy, placing soldiers at the front to boost morale and equality, while keeping generals like Felicius in the middle to curb their political influence. As the trumpets blared, the crowd erupted in surprise to see Lazru, a famous hunter from Bagul's tribe, leading the march. "He's leading the Greeks," the crowd marveled, noting the alliance's lack of ethnic prejudice. "Look, it's Bagul in the carriage," they cheered. "I wish I could be like him." Texima, Eurasa, and Hemen cheered wildly. Bagul's presence served as a powerful inspiration for the Lacanian youth. As the music ceased, the soldiers stood in silence before the Archon. I stepped forward, thanking the troops for their sacrifices in conquering Nerulum and securing Laos. I and the Senate bowed deeply to the soldiers. The plaza roared with shouts of victory. I declared the day a permanent alliance festival and announced that the unit's flag would become the official banner of the alliance. The crowd chanted, "Long live the alliance." I believed these symbols would help unify the diverse peoples of the Mediterranean into a new, cohesive identity. That afternoon, I hosted a banquet for Timasian, Xanthoparis, Cleaner, and Tormid, joined by Agathias, Felicius, and Hieronymus. The atmosphere was warm as they reminisced over food and wine. Cleaner, slightly drunk, asked, "Davos, you're an Archon and a legate now. When will we have a life like yours?" Agathias braced himself. The real conversation had begun. I replied calmly that wealth and status were rewards for contributions to the alliance, noting that many were wealthier than me. Cleaner complained about the 5-year wait for citizenship and the difficulty of joining the Senate. I affirmed that the law applied to all foreigners and freemen without exception. Cleaner accused Agathias of lying about how easy it would be to gain status, pointing out that former Lacanian slaves were already citizens and leaders. "Are we worth less than the natives?" he demanded. The room fell silent. Agathias felt the tension, regretting his past exaggerations. As others hesitated, I remained composed, signaling Agathias to stay calm. Cleaner sat down, frustrated by my lack of reaction. I explained the difference. The Lacanians had provided immense value by securing territory, building roads, and learning Greek laws. Their early citizenship was a reward for their tangible contributions to the alliance's survival. I added that the mercenaries could earn similar status by proving their worth in future wars. Empty, Agathias felt relieved by my support. Cleaner then accused me of acting like a tyrant, comparing me to Pisistrato of Athens. Felicius shouted at him for his insolence. I waved him off, acknowledging the accusation of tyranny. Cleaner, realizing he had overstepped, lowered his head. I explained that I ruled by law, not whim. With only 1,000 outsiders against tens of thousands of citizens, any favoritism would trigger a revolt or impeachment. I urged them to understand my position as a leader, not just a friend. Hieronymus apologized for his lack of perspective. Felicius admitted he had taken his status for granted. I toasted them, thanking them for their unwavering support. Timasian asked for advice regarding the 3,000 mercenaries arriving soon. I suggested they register for citizenship, find housing with fellow soldiers, and seek work on the docks or the new road to Nerulum. I promised that military training would prepare them for the upcoming war in Lucania, which would be their path to citizenship. The mercenaries found my advice logical. Xanthoparis expressed concern that their undisciplined nature might lead to legal trouble. I advised them to store their weapons in the armory until they settled in, to prevent accidental violence. I reassured them that the Alliance would not seize their gear, but emphasized that preventing conflict was essential for their integration. After the guests left, I went upstairs. Kelisuatuya asked how the banquet went. I sighed, noting the gap that had grown between me and my old comrades. Kelisuatuya asked if they had made unreasonable demands. I confirmed they wanted immediate citizenship and Senate seats. Kelisuatuya guessed it was cleaner, and I agreed. I noted that while their personalities differed, they all shared the same ambition. Kelisuatuya caressed my face, telling me that my rapid success naturally invited jealousy. Are you jealous too? I teased. I am madly in love with you, she replied, kissing me. My desires stirred, gently embraced her and touched her pregnant belly. Kelisuatuya teased me, reminding me we hadn't yet consulted the Temple of Hera about the baby's gender. I continued my advances, my touch causing her to tremble. Kelisuatuya gasped, reminding me of her pregnancy and suggesting I visit Asuna instead. I teased Kristuya, dismissing her pregnancy concerns as I seduced her. As I caressed her, she succumbed to my advances, her body fuller from pregnancy, as we shared an intimate moment. On the way back, Cleaner ranted about Davos forcing them to farm and build roads, fearing disarmament would leave them vulnerable. Xanthoparis countered that governing a new alliance required caution and impartiality. Cleaner argued they should be treated as allies, not laborers, though he privately lamented their lack of status compared to my success. Empty, the group fell into a depressed silence. Tormid remarked that it was fate they hadn't followed me sooner, praising me as God-favored for building such a legacy in mere months. Xanthoparis, weary of a life of constant mercenary warfare, expressed a longing for the stability of settling down. The others remained silent. Temasian urged them to focus on managing the incoming mercenaries to prevent trouble. Temasian's fears were realized the next morning. Over a dozen mercenaries were arrested after a violent market brawl. Temasian had to involve Agathias to secure their release, paying fines and accepting labor penalties for the offenders. To prevent further incidents, they rented housing at the port to monitor the arrivals. Despite their efforts, conflicts persisted, leading some senators to propose expelling the mercenaries. Though Agathias and others blocked the motion, I felt the mounting political pressure. By late November, Ananias completed the shipyard, and I placed an order for 3 triremes. The Senate prioritized building a fleet to protect trade and rectify the Alliance's lack of naval power. By early December, the new Senate Hall was finished, ending the need for officials to travel to Amendolara for meetings. The Thurii Castiglione Road neared completion, save for the Crathis River Bridge, and the Athletic Plaza was finishing up. Amidst these successes, a small cargo ship bearing the Spartan and symbol entered the Gulf of Taranto, causing other vessels to yield. Phoebidas, a Spartan commander, ordered his helmsman to sail straight into Thurii port without yielding. While Spartans knew Syracuse, they were largely ignorant of Magna Graecia, and Phoebidas observed the region with keen interest. Seeing the busy port, he remarked to his attendant, Dorobysus, that it rivaled Corinth. Dorobysus, a Perioikoi, noted that Corinth's trade was declining and teased Phoebidas to compare it to Athens instead. Phoebidas bristled at the mention of Athens, recalling the political fallout after the Peloponnesian War, where Spartan internal divisions allowed Athens to rebuild its democracy and trade. Phoebidas fell silent as a Dionysian patrol boat approached. He loudly declared himself a Spartan envoy demanding to see the Archon. The patrol boat rushed back to Thurii to report. The Senate operated on a rotating duty system, with 5 senators on call at the hall daily. I received the urgent report from Aristolus at my residence. I frowned, suspecting the Spartans were there regarding Temasian's mercenaries. The patrol boat returned to guide the Spartan ship into the port. Phoebidas analyzed the port's layout with a military eye, noting its vulnerability due to the distance from the city. Dorobysus, observing the fertile plains, remarked on the city's agricultural potential. Phoebus noted the city towers and the heavy iron chain across the Crathis River, designed to block enemy fleets. The ship docked at the northern pier. Noticing a charred, ruined section of the pier, Dorobisis asked the captain about it. The captain explained that I kept the ruins as a reminder of the city's past humiliation and the need to defend its glory, noting they had only recently cleared one site after the victory at Nerulum. Phoebus remained outwardly indifferent, but was inwardly moved by the captain's pride. A squad of guards approached them. Phoebus observed the patrol with surprise. Unlike other city-states, these soldiers maintained perfect formation and combat readiness, displaying a level of discipline he had only ever seen in Spartan citizens. The ship's captain handed over the party to patrol captain Oliverus and departed. "Your soldiers must remain on the ship," Oliverus stated sternly. "Alliance law forbids foreign troops from entering the city. They are Spartans. They have free passage in any Greek city-state." Phoebus retorted, "While an exaggeration, Spartans often claimed this privilege, much to the resentment of others." Oliverus remained unmoved. "I don't care what you do elsewhere. On Dionian soil, you obey our laws." Phoebus was furious, but Oliverus stood firm. Comply or leave. Dorobisis eventually compromised, allowing the Spartans to enter only after they changed into civilian clothing. Seething, Phoebus entered Thurii. Despite hearing it had been burned by Crotonians months prior, the city was immaculate. Wide, straight streets, orderly houses, and flower-filled rooftops defined the landscape. Aqueducts powered by massive water wheels fed fountains and statues in public squares, while drainage channels kept the city clean and vibrant. Unlike the chaotic, dirty streets of Athens or the rustic simplicity of Sparta, Thurii blended elegance, cleanliness, and tranquility into a captivating urban environment. "Who designed this city?" Dorobisis asked, impressed. "Heraclid, a student of Hippodamus," Oliverus replied proudly. "Hippodamus?" Dorobisis exclaimed. "The architect of Piraeus was legendary, and the Spartans had once fought hard to control his masterpiece." They soon encountered a massive white archway, a design unseen in any other Greek city. "What is this arch for?" Dorobisis asked. Oliverus's expression turned solemn. A triumphal arch returning generals and soldiers march through it to receive the honors of the Archon, the Senate, and the people. "We recently held a triumph for the conquest of Nerulum." Phoebus stared at the arch with a mix of shock and envy. In most Greek cities, such displays were avoided to prevent tyranny, and Spartan elders strictly controlled their warriors to prevent another Lysander-like figure. That a remote colonial city-state would celebrate its soldiers so openly unsettled him. "How often do you train?" he asked. "During the harvest, every 7 days," Oliverus replied. "Otherwise, every 2 or 3 days for a full day." Such frequent training surpassed most city-states. Phoebus realized his mission would be difficult. Passing through the Victory Square, they entered the Grand Senate House of Thurii. The hall was massive, yet the few dozen senators seated in front seemed small. As Phoebus entered, they stood and bowed in respect to Sparta, finally soothing his pride. A young man at the head spoke. "Welcome, Spartan envoy. What brings you to our Dionian League?" Phoebus realized this must be the military genius behind the city's design and the Archon. Phoebus stared aggressively. I returned the gaze, unblinking and piercing. I saw a man in a scarlet cloak with long hair, a scarred face, and an air of arrogant contempt. I reflected that this was the typical Spartan demeanor, unlike the exception I had seen in Clearchus. The tension mounted until Cunigurata cleared his throat to break the silence. "I come on behalf of Sparta," Phoebus declared, "to hold the Dionian League accountable." The senators erupted in an uproar. "Sparta fights Persia in Asia Minor to protect Greece," Phoebus continued. "Your influence lured our soldiers away, sabotaging our efforts and leading to the exile of Governor Thybron. The Gerousia demands an explanation for this betrayal." The senators exchanged nervous glances. "I don't understand," Cunigurata said. "We are thousands of miles away. How could we possibly lure your soldiers?" "Exactly," Plyzenas added. "We barely know where Asia Minor is." Phoebus sneered at me. "Those mercenaries fought in Persia alongside your Archon and others. We saw foreigners entering their camps." Agathias noticed Antonius and Capys exchanging glances and shook his head slightly. Are you certain these foreigners were our citizens? Antonius asked. The ships carrying the deserters headed for Magna Graecia, Phoebus stated firmly. The Spartan Jerusia demands you surrender all these mercenaries. Furthermore, as punishment for sabotaging our war, your Archon must lead 5,000 soldiers to Asia Minor to fight for Sparta. What? The senators shouted in shock. We have no diplomatic ties with you. By what right do you issue orders to us? You dare claim to represent Greece while sabotaging Sparta's holy war against Persia? We are the leaders of all Greece. Phoebus declared haughtily. I burst into laughter. The contempt in my voice silenced the restless senators. Myrsis chimed in. Lord Davos, what are you laughing at? I laugh at Spartan shamelessness. I sneered at Phoebus. Didn't Sparta collude with Persia, the eternal enemy of Greece, and slaughter fellow Greeks to defeat Athens? Why are you fighting your former allies now? Why indeed? Myrsis asked. To secure Persian funding against Athens, Sparta signed a treaty abandoning the cities of Asia Minor to Persian rule. Once victorious, you reneged on that promise, I said, staring at the flustered Phoebus. A traitor who sells out Greek interests and breaks oaths dares call this a holy war? How can I not laugh? Ridiculous. A disgrace to all Greeks. Senators led by Antonios and Amintas roared with laughter. Phoebus turned crimson. You dare insult Sparta? Do you not fear our wrath? The laughter continued unabated. Amintas shouted excitedly, Wrath? You mean war? Excellent. I've been waiting for another triumph. Lord Davos, let the 1st Battalion take the lead next time. The men are itching for action. Capys added, clearly incensed by the Spartans' arrogance. Indeed, the 1st Battalion has followed you since the beginning and hasn't had a triumph yet, Antonios agreed. Phoebus was stunned. His fury had been skillfully twisted into a demand for battle. Is the Dionysian League preparing for war with Sparta? He demanded sharply. The Dionysian League seeks no war, but if any city-state tries to bully or invade us, what is our answer? I asked the assembly. Fight to the death. Destroy the enemy, the former mercenaries shouted in unison. Phoebus stormed out, his face ashen. Dorobisus met him, asking anxiously, what happened? Leave. Board the ship. We're going back. Phoebus spat. Escorted by patrol boats, they were monitored until they reached the open sea. If I rammed them, Phoebus gestured to the patrol ships, would they sink? Dorobisus was shocked. He had sensed the mission would fail, but the level of Phoebus's rage was unprecedented. He dared not ask what occurred inside. Watching Thurii fade into the distance, Phoebus swallowed his humiliation. We go to Castron. Archon, driving away the Spartan envoy will bring trouble, Cornelius worried. I told you to banish those mercenaries. Now look at the mess. Polixenes complained. Plyzenus stood up. Have they not been punished by our laws? We need labor. Our open, equal society attracts foreigners. Expelling those who seek refuge destroys our reputation and alienates all Greeks. But what if Sparta declares war? Oriphis asked. Would you rather accept their unreasonable demands and send our citizens to Asia Minor? Plyzenus retorted. Oriphis glanced at me, cowed into silence. Sparta won't necessarily attack, I said confidently. We are a power in Magna Graecia. They are bogged down in Asia Minor and fighting Elis in the Peloponnese. They won't risk another war here. Privately, I regretted my impulsive promise to Agathias, fearing my expansion plans might be derailed if Sparta went mad. The Spartan fleet's move toward Castron was reported to the Senate. I and the Senate urgently dispatched messengers to order Castron to refuse the Spartan envoy. Using the new road, the messenger arrived just as Chief General Amicles and the Council of 100 gathered at the port to welcome the Spartan, fearing to slight the hegemon. As Phoebus disembarked, a subordinate handed Amicles a papyrus. His face paled, and he told Phoebus, Honored envoy, an urgent matter has arisen. Please wait. He huddled with his generals and counselors. Something is wrong, Dorobisus whispered. Phoebus watched, sensing danger. Amicles returned, resolute. As a member of the Dionysian League, we have been ordered not to host you. You must leave. Soldiers stepped forward. This is an insult to Sparta. You will pay. Phoebus threatened. He had hoped to sow discord between Castron and Dionia, or capture runaway mercenaries. Now, both were impossible. As Phoebidas departed, Amicles felt relief, though he feared the consequences of defying Sparta. Still undeterred, Phoebidas turned his ships toward Tarentum. As a powerful state in Magna Graecia and a Spartan colony, Tarentum was a friendly destination where he hoped to find support. Tarentum's origin is dramatic. Centuries ago, Sparta conquered Messenia, turning its people into helots. Due to the long absence of Spartan men, their women bore children with the local perioikoi. These illegitimate sons were rejected by Sparta. Their leader, Phalanthos, eventually secured a cryptic oracle from Apollo, found a city where rain falls from a clear sky. Sparta allowed them to leave to establish a colony. Phalanthos sailed west, searching for a site. Frustrated by the fruitless voyage, he wept on his wife's lap. When she felt his distress, her tears fell onto his forehead. Realizing his wife's name meant clear sky, he understood the oracle. They landed at the Gulf of Puglia, founding a city named after Terus, son of Poseidon. Despite its Spartan roots, Tarentum evolved into a prosperous, democratic commercial city-state. It maintained ties with Sparta, supporting them during the Peloponnesian War and refusing the Athenian fleet. In retaliation, Athens began backing the Messapians against Tarentum. Phoebidas was welcomed in Tarentum, but he quickly pivoted to attacking the Dionysian League, labeling them aggressive, disrespectful of Greek tradition, and a danger to all Magna Graecia. He urged Tarentum to abandon its alliance with the Dionysian League and help curb its expansion. Archons Diomedes and Eutychus deflected his pressure with humor. Only when pressed did they dismiss his concerns, suggesting a misunderstanding and offering to mediate between the League and Sparta. Empty, as Phoebidas departed, Diomedes dropped his facade, telling Eutychus, "Sparta is right. If Tarentum doesn't act, even a newcomer like Dionia will look down on us." Eutychus hesitated. "Are we really going to war with the Messapi? They are already at war with us." Diomedes retorted, "Our tolerance is seen as weakness. We must strike back and settle the Messapian problem once and for all." "Settle it? That's not what you said before." Eutychus frowned. Diomedes corrected himself. "I mean, we must first seize Manduria, then hopefully Brundisium to boost our strength, before dealing with the other Messapian cities." Eutychus was tempted but doubtful. "Do we have the strength to crush their main force?" "We do," Diomedes insisted. "And we have a powerful reserve." "What reserve?" Eutychus asked. Diomedes pointed west. "Dionia. We've helped them enough. It's time they return the favor." Eutychus finally agreed. "I will support your proposal in the Senate." "Damn it," Phoebidas cursed on his ship. "Dionia, Castron, and Tarentum are all in league together." When Dorobysus suggested Croton, Phoebidas snapped, "We go to Syracuse." He knew Croton's poor relations with Dionia, but he couldn't risk going there. It would alienate Locri, an ally of Syracuse. He didn't want to be exiled like Thybron, and Syracuse was a superior partner. He resolved to be more subtle with the powerful Sicilian tyrant, learning from his past failures. The new Christoia restaurant in Thurii catered to elites, envoys, and wealthy merchants, offering high-end fare like hot pot in private, ventilated courtyards. Timasian, Xanthoparis, and Cleaner arrived, familiar with the luxury from Lord Diffusi's estate. Cleaner asked the slave serving them about the price. The slave replied, "It depends on your consumption, usually 2 to 5 drachma." "That's expensive," Cleaner exclaimed. "I don't earn that much in a day." The slave explained the costs: premium meat from Nerulum, ice imported from distant mountains, skilled butchers, and Egyptian chefs for sauces. Given the labor and quality, is it truly expensive? Cleaner was impressed but muttered, "A pity you are a slave." The slave, Taneris, smiled. "Our mistress is merciful. Under the League's law, I can earn my freedom in 10 years. I will become a Dionysian citizen." Cleaner wondered if Lord Diffusi feared backlash from slave owners, but asked, "What is your name?" "Taneris." Cleaner offered a hollow blessing, which Timasian mocked. Cleaner feigned anger and raised his beer. "Let's drink." Timasian joined him. "Let's finish it in one go." They drank. Xanthoparis warned them to slow down, joking that Agathias was paying, and suggested he ask for a discount since it was Diffusi's business. Cleaner, slightly drunk, retorted with a hint of jealousy. Agathias is a senator. He can afford it. Agathias ignored the jab and insisted they drink their fill. Temasian ordered another beer, praising the quality. Cleaner followed suit. Daenerys hurried to relay the order. The banquet continued, the guests growing tipsy. Xanthoparis reflected on their journey. A year ago, we were fighting Persians daily, surrounded by corpses, never dreaming we'd survive to eat and drink in peace. We must thank the gods. Temasian raised his cup. To our survival. The others echoed. Thanks to Zeus and Hades. Xanthoparis noticed Agathias's gloom and asked, You didn't just bring us here to drink, did you? Agathias paused, then sighed. Spartan envoys arrived today, demanding the League arrest and surrender you. The group knew of the Spartan ships in the harbor, but hadn't realized the envoys were there for them. Cleaner asked anxiously, How did you answer them? I firmly rejected the Spartans, even under threat of war. Agathias replied, bringing them relief. Cleaner praised me. A true leader, fearless of Spartan threats. Temasian added, Spartans aren't invincible. We served with them in Asia Minor. They rely on mercenaries and allies. They struggle against Persia alone. They have no strength to provoke us. Agathias remained despondent. I brought you here under false pretenses to offer you a better life, but it caused conflict and drew Spartan hostility. I am being blamed by the Senate. Did I make a mistake? Empty. The three exchanged glances. Xanthoparis comforted him. You saved us from a death trap. We will gain citizenship and land in time. As for Sparta, they won't act against us for at least 3 or 4 years. Agathias drank undiluted wine until he was completely intoxicated. They helped him home, feeling heavy-hearted. Cleaner muttered, He regrets bringing us. Will he stop helping us now? Xanthoparis shook his head. He's just stressed. We need to better control our own men. As they argued, Temasian walked silently in thought. Temasian, what are you thinking? Back to the docks. Cleaner called. Temasian replied solemnly. I remember myself saying, relying on others is worse than relying on oneself. Phoebidas arrived in Syracuse and was lavishly entertained by Dionysius. Watching the dancers, Phoebidas drank heavily to distract himself. He thought of Lysander's former life as a king-like figure in Asia Minor. Dionysius asked casually, Did you succeed in Dionia? No, Phoebidas admitted. The Dionian magistrates and senate were unyielding, even against Sparta. You seem to admire them, Dionysius noted with surprise. They value war, honor capable generals, and train like Spartans, Phoebidas praised. They've grown from a small city to a power in Magna Graecia in months. Dionysius smiled. Good, they can challenge the natives. But he slammed his cup down and abruptly changed the subject to his war with Carthage. Phoebidas smirked. On the return voyage, Dorobysus asked why Phoebidas praised Dionia. To keep Dionysius awake at night, Phoebidas laughed. Dionysius wants to be the master of Sicily and Magna Graecia. He won't tolerate a rival, but he's currently distracted by Carthage. Dorobysus asked, Won't he prioritize Rhegium or Croton over Dionia? Yes, Phoebidas agreed. But Dionia's rapid growth will alarm him. Dorobysus marveled at the size of the Syracusan army. Numbers don't equal skill, Phoebidas countered, masking his envy of Syracuse's power. He hoped Syracuse, Carthage, and Dionia would destroy each other. By 398 BC, the Thuriacastran road was finished, and the Croton captives were released. I was anxious and excited. Chris's pregnancy was nearing its end. Nerulum reported that Potentia was backing Lazo's attempt to reclaim Gramintum, threatening war against Sensing. Sensing panicked and offered to reconcile with the local tribes to face the common threat. The tribes, fearing Lazo's vengeance, agreed to negotiate. During the peace talks, Sensing ambushed and slaughtered the tribal leaders. The leaderless southern tribes were crushed by Sensing's forces. I admired Sensing's ruthlessness, noting he had learned from his past failures. Sicida reported that refugees from the conflict were flooding into Nerulum, swelling the reserve citizen count to 8,000. He requested to relocate some to Thurii. I and the Senate agreed to the migration. Phoebidas's report on Dionia was ignored by the Spartan Gerusia, who blamed his own arrogance for the failure. More importantly, King Agis had died. Sparta's dual monarchy, held by the Agiad and Europondid dynasties, was in mourning. The funeral rites were extensive and mandatory for all, including the perioikoi. Public business was suspended for 10 days. Empty, succession laws favored the eldest son or the nearest male relative if the king had no heir. Leotychides, Agus's son, was the heir, but his legitimacy was questioned due to his mother's affair with the Athenian Alcibiades. Agus's brother, Agesilaus, a respected and traditional Spartan, was a strong rival despite his limp. The succession crisis ensured the Gerousia would ignore Dionia. The merchant Theos returned to Thurii, noting the expanded harbor, stone piers, and efficient management. Officials from the census office monitored laborers, affecting their chances for future citizenship. Armed patrols maintained order. The harbor was now enclosed by a massive wall. The market had expanded rapidly, with organized stalls and wide lanes for transport and fire safety. 2 new buildings stood out. The hospital, with its advanced medical practices and strict management, was a marvel that attracted patients and doctors alike. The court, designed to handle trade disputes, was also a major attraction. I had established the position of high judge to relieve the city magistrates, appointing Proxolaus to the role. Proxolaus, finding little to do, personally presided over the market court. "What is the next case?" Proxolaus asked eagerly. Junior Magistrate Phlockleon, formerly a subordinate of Cunigarata, felt slighted. Though promoted to a junior magistrate, he was quickly overshadowed by Proxolaus, a senator and senior magistrate appointed by me to emphasize the importance of law. Proxolaus now held authority over Phlockleon's performance reviews and career recommendations. "A citizen's wife is accusing a Regium merchant of discrimination," Phlockleon reported. "Discrimination?" Proxolaus asked. "She is a Lacanian," Phlockleon whispered. Proxolaus nodded. "Bring them in." The small market court allowed public viewing from behind iron railings, serving to educate foreigners on Dionian law while keeping judges under public scrutiny. The pair entered and swore an oath by the judges of Hades, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, to speak only the truth. The plaintiff began her testimony. The young Lacanian woman spoke fluent but accented Greek. "Honorable judge, I am the wife of Citizen Isam. I went to this merchant's shop to buy an olive oil jar. Because I took time to choose, he suddenly exploded. 'Damn barbarian, don't touch my goods with your dirty hands. If you break it, even selling you as a slave wouldn't cover the cost.' Judge, she lies." "I never said that," the merchant shouted. "Silence until it is your turn," Proxolaus scolded, gesturing for the woman to continue. He also said, the woman flushed with anger, "that a barbarian woman like me isn't fit for such noble pottery, and that I should be his slave to please him in exchange for a jar." Note: Alcibiades' affair is detailed in From City-State to Empire. Note: the Persian succession tradition, where the eldest son born after the king's accession inherits, explains Cyrus the Younger's rebellion. He believed he was the rightful heir over Artaxerxes. "Empty. I never said that," the merchant denied. Suddenly, the crowd behind the railings erupted in fury. "How dare he discriminate against us Lacanians? Isam is our hero. Punish this pervert." The merchant realized his mistake. He had assumed the woman was a slave, as was common in other city-states. He didn't realize Dionia's culture was different. Many citizens married Lacanian women, and I allowed my wife to conduct business in public, shifting local customs toward greater openness. "Is this true?" Proxolaus asked. "Discrimination carries a fine and corporal punishment, but perjury before the gods is a capital offense punishable by having your tongue cut out. Choose your words carefully." The merchant sweated, then whispered, "Most of it is true, but I didn't know discriminating against foreigners was illegal. Did you not read the Dionian trade regulations when renting your stall?" Proxolaus demanded. The merchant, remembering the mandatory requirement for stall rentals, nodded. "You knowingly broke the law. 10 drachmae fine and 2 lashes for discrimination. As for the verbal insult, does our law cover this?" Proxolaus asked Phlockleon. Phlockleon shook his head. "I shall address this in the Senate," Proxolaus muttered. "I leave the punishment for the insult to the plaintiff." The woman replied, "Make him serve as a guide for the market administration office for 5 days." "Agreed," Proxolaus said. "Accept this or be expelled from the alliance forever. Choose." The merchant, valuing his profitable business over his pride, accepted the labor. The next case involved a freeman who assaulted a foreign merchant. The freeman, a henchman of Senator Polixenes, tried to intimidate Proxolaus into dropping the charges. Proxolaus, who disliked the arrogant Polixenes, roared, "You dare use a senator's name to cover your crimes? You are guilty of assault and perjury. I sentence you to the tongue-cutting punishment." The crowd cheered. Terrified, the freeman chose 40 lashes instead. He was carried out, and the registry office marked him for future expulsion. Theos, watching from the outside, realized this court was a powerful display of Dionia's commitment to justice, regardless of status or origin, a stark contrast to other Greek cities. In most Greek cities, local citizens and officials were hostile toward foreign merchants. Only Athens was relatively open, granting foreigners rights in exchange for their economic contributions. Foreigners in Athens often reciprocated by funding temples, festivals, and military equipment during crises. Dionia was following this model, even going further by opening land between the Saraceno and Cisno rivers for foreign industrial use on 20-year leases. This news caused a stir across Magna Graecia. With the new road connecting Thurii and Laos, trade would become faster and safer than the risky sea routes through the heavily taxed Strait of Messina. Theos had seen the land. Though rocky and unsuitable for farming, it was perfect for his planned weapon workshop. Dionia's martial culture meant constant demand for arms. The current state-run shop only repaired captured gear. Theos saw a lucrative opportunity to manufacture high-quality equipment. With access to local copper and iron, and the ability to hire skilled Corinthian smiths, Theos could produce superior armor and weapons for the Dionian military and indigenous tribes, ensuring a stable, profitable business. Empty. Outside, the market was cleaner, with organized stables replacing the previous filth. Theos called for his regular driver, Sorikos. "He's rich now. He doesn't drive himself," someone joked. Sorikos emerged, laughing, and took Theos to his carriage. "Going to see the land for lease?" Sorikos asked. "Many are. I hear you've struck it rich." Theos asked. "I paid off my carriage and bought another." Sorikos said confidently. "I'll be a fleet owner soon." "Congratulations," Theos said. Sorikos laughed. "You're a citizen with an allotment," Theos noted. "How do you manage the land while driving?" "I lease it to a freeman," Sorikos replied. They drove down the Thurii-Amendalara road, passing thriving fields and new homes. Theos marveled at the rapid development, believing Dionia would soon surpass the old powers. They passed vineyards and wineries near the Cyprus River. Beyond the Saraceno River lay the leasehold land. It was perfectly situated near the road, river, and forest, an ideal spot for a workshop and home. Theos decided to find a hotel before the auction the next day. Sorikos suggested, "Go see the rugby tournament at the new circus. Davos invented it. They say it's a gift from Hades." "Rugby?" Theos asked. "A game with an olive-shaped ball," Sorikos explained. "It's incredibly exciting." "I'll go," Theos said. "Go early, it's packed." Sorikos warned. Empty. The circus was located in the northeast, away from the main city. Guards checked for weapons but allowed the crowds in efficiently. Theos met Dikiopoulos, a Cretan merchant who had already seen a match and was obsessed with the game, calling it the best gift Hades ever gave the Greeks. Theos was now eager. The line was long but orderly under military supervision. Dikiopoulos bought beer and dried fruit for them while they waited. Theos thanked him and asked, "How much?" Dikiopoulos insisted. "Fate brought us together to watch this rugby match. If you pay, you're not treating me like a Cretan friend." Theos accepted, charmed by Dikiopoulos's lively nature. He noticed many others rushing to buy beer, fruit drinks, and snacks. Dikiopoulos explained, "The games are long and the sun is hot. You'll get hungry and thirsty. Plus, if you need to relieve yourself and can't find a spot, this empty jug," he joked, lifting his beer container, "makes a perfect chamber pot." Guards admitted spectators in batches. Dikiopoulos and Theos entered through the standard side passage, noting the restricted VIP entrance reserved for dignitaries, a standard design in all arenas. The Thurii arena held about 4,000 people, though 4,500 were packed inside today, half being freemen or foreigners. The center was a flat, rectangular sand pitch marked by white lines, surrounded by a running track. Dikiopoulos explained the four-city rugby tournament. Originally a military training drill devised by Archon Diffusi for mercenaries in Amendolara, it spread to Thurii, Nerulum, and Laos as the Dionian League expanded. Today's match between Amendolara and Nerulum promised to be a close, exciting contest. You know quite a lot, Theos remarked. I'm interested, so I learn, Dikiopoulos said proudly. I've made friends with Dionian citizens, including a cohort leader who keeps me informed. Why isn't Castron involved? A voice asked from the crowd forming around them. Dikiopoulos shrugged. They've had little contact with the league. But I saw Castronians here today. I suspect next time it will be a 5-city tournament. You're right, Cretan. We'll participate next year, someone shouted. We'll propose it to our council, another agreed. Dikiopoulos winked at Theos, whispering, see? I told you. A bronze horn sounded, signaling the athlete's entrance. Players now wore protective leather caps and padded woolen tunics dyed red or blue, marked with Arabic numerals for easy identification by referees. Rhythmic, powerful drumming accompanied the team's entry. The red team formed a phalanx, performing a vigorous war dance to honor Ares. The crowd erupted in cheers. Empty, the drums ceased, replaced by the deep, resonant blast of ox-horn trumpets. The blue team performed a wild, primal dance with strange, energetic movements that thrilled the audience. Theos was so captivated by the spectacle, he missed Dikiopoulos' words. Theos, who are you rooting for? The blue team. Theos replied instantly, drawn by their raw energy. You're rooting for the Lacanians? Dikiopoulos asked, surprised. That's the Nerulum team? Theos realized, understanding their unique dance style. Didn't you read the signs? Dikiopoulos countered. I support Amendolara. Many of their citizens are Cretans, including my friends. The teams turned to face the VIP box. Amidst the roar, a man stood up. That is Diffusi, the Archon for life of the Dionian League. Dikiopoulos said with a mix of awe and envy. Theos felt a powerful urge to see the legendary God-favored man in person. Diffusi waved his right hand. Sharp horn blasts signaled the start of the match. Lord Diffusi, the turnout is even higher this afternoon, with many foreign merchants, Maligi reported excitedly. Your plan to use sports to draw wealth to Thurii is working. Mersis added, beer, drinks, and snacks are nearly sold out, along with sun hats and cushions. Kinagarata, the magistrate of Thurii, beamed. The rugby matches are a huge draw. We should hold them regularly and charge admission, like theater. Does the revenue go to the national treasury? Mersis asked. Yes, Diffusi confirmed. But we must pay the players and provide pensions for the injured. Use the surplus to build more arenas. U5 will form a rugby committee to promote the sport and attract more foreigners. Eventually, we will host a Magna Graecia rugby games. Diffusi's vision inspired them. Just as the Greeks had the Olympic, Isthmian, Pythian, and Nemean games to honor their gods and boost their city-states' prestige, a Hades Games could cement the Dionian League's influence and immortalize them all. Diffusi mused on the potential for other sports like football, while nearby, Amintas and Matonis cheered as Tegetinos scored a touchdown. Get me another beer, Amintas told his slave. Master, the beer is sold out, the slave replied. Sold out. Amintas complained to Diffusi. Your beer is delicious, but there's never enough. Diffusi smiled, noting the need to expand the brewery. Everyone, Diffusi announced. You know my wife recently purchased the hot spring marsh north of Thurii. Burkos nodded. As agricultural officer, he had processed the sale, having previously advised Calixituoya against buying the mosquito-ridden, useless land. I propose building a grand hot spring bath to attract merchants and citizens, requiring significant funding for drainage, river diversion, and construction. I sincerely invited the senators to invest. Greeks of this era preferred simple hygiene, olive oil and scraping, over bathing. Many senators hesitated at this novel concept. Maligi, accustomed to Persian luxury, immediately pledged to invest, trusting my proven business acumen with the bank and breweries. Mersis, also recognizing my talent, quickly followed suit. Cunigarata and Cornelius, familiar with my administrative success, also agreed to invest. Silas, Matonis, Amintas, Antonius, and Alexis, the former mercenary leaders, offered their blind, unwavering trust. While a few Thurii elders like Burkos and Ansitanos offered token support, others like Polixenes and Ananias openly doubted the venture's profitability. Conversely, Amendolara elders like Scombras and Sitalongbali, initially skeptical, supported me out of regional solidarity against the Thurii dissenters. Waizaba, lacking business insight but knowing his weak political standing, followed my lead. What began as a commercial venture to bind the Senate's interests became a clear display of the senators' divided loyalties toward me. Theos watched the rugby match, mesmerized by the unexpected intensity. He realized this was far superior to the simple Spartan stone-throwing games he had imagined. Dicaeopolis supported Amendolara, but Theos found himself silently rooting for the trailing Niudum team, currently down 3-0. Theos grew anxious, secretly cheering for Niudum. Niudum launched an attack, but Amendolara's defense was tight, forcing the ball carrier to the sideline. Just as he was cornered, he passed through his legs to the quarterback, who dodged 2 defenders and launched a desperate throw. The ball soared 40 meters, appearing destined to go out of bounds, prompting groans from the crowd. Suddenly, a blue-clad player sprinted past the red team interceptors and leaped high. Amidst gasps, he caught the ball in midair, landing just yards from the touchdown zone. The red team screamed in panic, their voices audible to the spectators. The player dove headlong into the touchdown zone, dragging a defender with him, and secured the score. Theos erupted in excitement, cheering and downing his beer, feeling invigorated by the thrill. He realized his hands were sweating. This sport was far more intense than traditional athletics. Dicaeopolis noted, "So you support Niudum?" Theos sheepishly replied, "Someone has to support the underdogs to make it exciting." Dicaeopolis nodded in agreement. Referees rushed to the touchdown zone as the scorer remained down. Theos's heart tightened with worry. A stretcher was brought, but the player, clutching a dislocated arm, stood up on his own. As he walked off, the crowd gave him a hero's ovation for his courageous performance. "Rugby is truly a sport for warriors," Theos exclaimed. A nearby spectator vowed to introduce rugby to Castron citizens so they could compete in the future. While the public was distracted by the match, Temasian, Cleaner, and Tuolakexi held a secret meeting in a slum house. Tuolakexi, Temasian's lieutenant, reported that 1,700 men were ready to follow them. Cleaner felt the number was still insufficient. Temasian insisted it was enough to conquer Crimissa, which had only 1,000 fighting citizens, provided they could take the city quickly. Cleaner emphasized the need for siege equipment and absolute secrecy to prevent me from intervening. Tuolakexi confirmed he had misled the men, telling them they were heading to Syracuse to serve Dionysius and earn citizenship. Cleaner expressed contempt for Xanthoparis and Tormid, labeling them cowards who preferred labor to the battlefield. Temasian reassured him that they would regret their choice once the group seized Crimissa. Tuolakexi voiced a final concern. How would they handle a potential counterattack from Croton? Cleaner scoffed, suggesting they seize Crimissa and then pledge allegiance to the Dionian League. He argued that I, pressured by former comrades, now Dionian senators and citizens, would be forced to support them, as I couldn't defy the will of those who elected me. Temasian agreed, noting they could replicate my path to power in Magna Graecia. Frustrated by their current status, he expressed a fierce determination to seize Crimissa with Dionian backing. Days later, I received reports of unrest among the mercenaries led by Temasian and Cleaner, just as Temasian arrived to request an audience. I was surprised when Temasian announced their intention to leave the League. Temasian stated they were heading to Syracuse to aid Dionysius, who had promised them land and citizenship upon victory. I, aware of Dionysius's reputation through Aristolus, knew such promises were common tactics for the Syracusan ruler. Temasian explained that while they appreciated the help, they were accustomed to freedom and struggled with the League's strict laws and the delay in gaining citizenship. He argued that their departure was best for both parties. Seeing Temasian's resolve, I nodded and asked if they required any assistance. Temasian requested the return of their stored weapons, a guarantee for transport ships, tents for camping, and rations. The news of 1,700 mercenaries leaving caused a stir in the Senate. For officials like Cunigarata and Cornelius, who had dealt with the unruly mercenaries for months, this was a relief. Conversely, Former mercenary leaders like Felicius and Agathias felt deep regret. I felt relieved. The mercenaries' presence had become a liability, as their misconduct fueled complaints from both the Senate and the public, threatening my own prestige. On the day of their departure, many former comrades gathered at the port to see them off. Temasian embraced Agathias, thanking him for his genuine support and promising to repay his kindness. Cleaner arrogantly told those staying behind that they would eventually regret not leaving and would come begging for help. Watching the ships depart, a dejected Agathias asked me if he had been wrong to invite them to the League. I patted his shoulder, pointing to the soldiers who had chosen to settle down, noting that not all mercenaries craved constant war. I explained that while they had changed since their time in Persia, the departing mercenaries had not. Accepting those who adapted was right, but letting those who refused to change leave was the best solution. Reflecting on the complaints he had endured, Agathias agreed with my assessment. Half an hour later, the fleet was well clear of Thurii, heading south toward Syracuse. Temasian signaled the fleet, and his men seized control of the captains and sailors, promising them safety if they changed course. Raising red flags, the mercenaries quickly secured all 40 ships, following a secret plan coordinated by their officers. Temasian ordered the fleet to a beach between Crimissa and Castiglione. When the captain resisted, he was beaten into submission, and 2 sailors were stabbed to ensure compliance. The captain warned that as registered freemen, their mistreatment would provoke the League's wrath. Temasian knew this was a risk. He feared that harming the crew would anger me, as I prioritized law over personal ties, potentially ruining his plan to secure Crimissa. He ordered the wounded sailors treated and swore to the captain that they would be released once the mercenaries were ashore. The captain reluctantly ordered the helmsman to turn. Temasian quietly urged his men to avoid further violence. He knew his control over the disparate, mercenary-led group was tenuous at best. Guided by hired scouts, the fleet landed on a secluded beach near Castiglione to avoid detection by Crimissa. As the soldiers forced the crew off the ships, the captain demanded his promised release. Temasian coldly refused, binding the crew and leaving them in the grass to prevent them from raising an alarm. He then ordered his men to drag the ships ashore and began constructing siege ladders from hidden materials. Temasian had used the request for tents and rations to mask his true intentions, successfully deceiving me. He told the captain the supplies on board belonged to me and should be returned to me. Ignoring the crew's pleas, he led his men on a rapid march south. Moving 1,700 men across open plains in spring was difficult to conceal. Temasian had opted for a daylight landing, accepting the risk of detection over the dangers of navigating a large fleet at night. Temasian planned a lightning raid on Crimissa, aiming to strike before the city could react. A large swampy area, formed by the Lakili River, lay between Castron and Crimissa. Temasian had scouted it in December, noting the coastal path was passable and equipped with ferries and bridges for trade. Unexpectedly, spring thaws and heavy January rains caused the river to flood, significantly expanding the swamp and hindering the mercenaries' march. As the mercenaries struggled through the mud, local farmers and slaves fled at their approach. Soon, scattered cavalry appeared, signaling that the element of surprise was lost. Temasian gathered his officers, Cleaner and Tuolakexi, to debate whether to abort the mission. Most officers insisted on continuing. They argued that abandoning their long-planned opportunity would expose their intentions to me and the Thurians, forcing them to leave Magna Graecia forever. Temasian agreed and revised the plan. They would force a march, storm Crimissa immediately, and secure the city before reinforcements arrived. They would then seek protection under the Dionian League to ensure their safety. The officers unanimously approved the new plan. Faster, brothers, Temasian shouted to boost morale. Once we clear this, Crimissa is ours for the taking. Cleaner and Tuolakexi echoed his commands, urging the men forward. The battle-hardened soldiers pushed through the grueling terrain, finally emerging from the swamp. A patrol captain named Timiadiesi rode up, demanding to know why they were trespassing. A mercenary javelin instantly pierced his chest, killing him and sending the remaining cavalry fleeing. Who threw that? Temasian cursed, furious that his attempt to deceive the locals had been ruined by his undisciplined men. Cleaner whispered, "Don't blame them now. It will hurt morale. Despite his frustration, Temasian suppressed his anger, agreeing that speed was now paramount. I turned to my guide and demanded to know the distance to the city. The terrified guide stammered, "About 10 li left." Temasian ordered his herald to push the men forward, promising rest only after they reached Crimisa. The surrounding fields were deserted. The local laborers had clearly fled into the city. Half an hour later, the city came into view, and Temasian ordered the troops to slow their pace. Crimisa, located south of Cape Alice, had a history of shifting allegiances between Sybaris, Croton, and Athens. After the recent war between Thurii and Croton, Crimisa had suffered heavy casualties and lost its neutrality. Empty, Crimisa's leaders feared another conflict between the recovering Croton and the rapidly expanding Dionian League, viewing their position between the two powers as a looming disaster. While Castron prospered under the Dionian League, Crimisa remained culturally and politically aligned with Croton. When the Crimizan Council received reports of soldiers crossing the swamp, they were alarmed. Chief General Antorus overruled those calling for caution, insisting on sending scouts and requesting aid from Croton. "These are armed men approaching our city," Antorus argued. "We have fewer than 1,000 citizen soldiers. If we wait to confirm their identity, it will be too late. I would rather apologize to Croton later than lose our home now." His logic prevailed. Shortly after sending messengers to Croton, scouts confirmed 2,000 heavily armed infantry with ladders were approaching and had already killed a patrolman. Realizing the threat, the council issued an emergency mobilization, ordering all able-bodied men to the walls. Antorus, learning from Thurei's past, granted citizenship to 500 young freemen to bolster their defenses. As the mercenaries reached a point 200 meters from the northern wall, they saw the defenders lining the ramparts. "They are prepared," Cleaner noted with disappointment. Temasian remained firm. "Since surprise is gone, we storm it." I ordered the troops to take a brief rest. I and my officers huddled to finalize the assault strategy. The city's defenses, a 4-meter wall and a 3-meter moat, were primitive compared to those they had faced in Asia Minor. I and my officers were confident that the inexperienced, low-morale Crimizan citizen soldiers would be no match for their veteran mercenary force. Temasian rallied his mercenaries before Crimisa. "You've spent 2 months in the Dionian League. Are you satisfied? Davos has everything while we have nothing. Take this city, and we shall become masters and nobles ourselves." The mercenaries roared, clashing their spears against their shields to vent their frustration and fuel their desperate hunger for a better future. Their thunderous cries reached the city walls, visibly shaking the Crimizans. General Eurycpus, desperate to boost morale, shouted, "Citizens, they are no more numerous than us. We have walls and a moat, and Croton's reinforcements are already on the way." Reassured by the promise of aid, the Crimizans held firm. Temasian immediately ordered the assault. Bugles sounded as Cleaner attacked the west, and Temasian led the charge on the north. Hoplites advanced in loose formations, carrying ladders, with peltasts trailing behind. As they neared arrow range, they raised their shields to protect their heads and chests. Arrows rained down, but the mercenaries pressed on. They bridged the moat with 6-meter ladders. More men fell into the water due to clumsy footing than from enemy fire. Eurycpus watched their disciplined, tactical movements with growing dread. These were seasoned veterans. "Quick, bring more stones, wood, and flax oil to the walls," he commanded. Once across, the hoplites rushed the walls, planting their ladders. Others remained across the moat to facilitate the peltasts crossing. The Crimizans rained down debris and flaming oil, causing heavy casualties. Meanwhile, I received the shocking news that Temasian had bypassed Syracuse to strike Crimisa. Passing merchant ships had discovered the abandoned, bound crews of the hijacked transport fleet on the coast. Rescued, the sailors returned to Thurii port and reported the incident to the patrol. I was furious. Beyond the loss of my ships and men, I was enraged that Temasian had used my sponsorship to land over 1,000 mercenaries between Castron and Crimisa. I realized the mercenaries were targeting Crimisa. I had been deceived. I knew this move would shatter the delicate balance between Dionia and Croton, forcing the League to prepare for war. I dreaded the inevitable Senate meeting, where my personal error in trusting Agathias would be exploited. I summoned my former mercenary commanders, Felicius, Agathias, Hieronymus, Capus, and Antonius, to coordinate. Leader, our men are breaking through, a subordinate shouted. Temasian looked up to see a soldier gaining a foothold on the ramparts. The soldier was pushed off by spears, falling 4 meters to the ground. Dazed, he was struck by a stone and killed, his heavy Corinthian helmet hindering his vision and defense. Temasian ordered, "Send Ixagiasiasi and the Peltasts closer to support the hoplites." A messenger hesitated. "They are Peltasts, sir. They lack armor. The archers will slaughter them." "Empty. We are sieging a city." Temasian roared. "If the hoplites fail, the city stays standing and our lives mean nothing. Go." Temasian watched the messenger cross the moat. The ground was littered with the dead and dying. He recalled the grueling months-long siege of Larissa under Thybron. He knew speed was his only chance. A shout warned him, and he ducked behind his shield just as an arrow struck it with a metallic clang. He heard screams followed by a loud crash. He knew a ladder had been pushed over, and his irritation deepened. "General, the enemy Peltasts are closing in," a citizen soldier cried, alarming Eurycpus. The Peltasts had reached the wall, their accurate, lethal archery inflicting heavy casualties on the Crimson defenders. "Ignore the ladders. Focus fire on the Peltasts," Eurycpus commanded. Another mercenary reached the ramparts. He deflected spears with his shield, leaped forward, and slashed at the defenders' unarmored legs before retreating to the safety of the ladder, shielded and crouched. The defenders feared his blade, allowing a second mercenary to climb up. "Push them back." Eurycpus led the reserve force, forcing the mercenaries into a corner with a wall of spears. As Eurycpus ordered his men to pry away the enemy's shields, a soldier beside him shrieked, struck by a javelin. The Peltasts below provided cover fire, allowing the hoplites to accelerate their ascent. Eurycpus committed his remaining forces, eventually driving the mercenaries off the wall, but the walkway was left choked with Crimson dead and wounded. Realizing the ferocity of these veterans, Eurycpus felt his strength failing. "Notify General Antorus. The enemy is throwing everything at the north wall. We need reinforcements immediately." Antorus had no reserves left. With the enemy hammering the north and west, the eastern garrison remained idle, a critical oversight. Antorus ordered General Pleiades to immediately lead the eastern garrison to reinforce Eurycpus. A messenger dodged arrows, shouting to Temasian, "The enemy has abandoned the eastern wall." "I see it," Temasian replied excitedly. "Tell Tulikexi to move now." "Yes." Temasian rallied his men and charged the ladders. Boosted by his soldiers, he scaled the wall, ignored the incoming spears, and leaped onto the ramparts, cutting down enemies with his falchions. "Back to back," he commanded, gathering his mercenaries. Inspired by Temasian, the mercenaries breached the northern wall. Only the arrival of Pleiades' reinforcements prevented a total collapse of Eurycpus's defense. As reinforcements flooded the walkway, the Crimson's morale surged, threatening to push the mercenaries back. Suddenly, chaos erupted in the east. "The enemy is inside," the citizens screamed. Eurycpus looked east to see Peltasts armed with falchions storming the walkway. Unable to pull troops from the fierce fighting to block the eastern breach, the defense faltered. The Thracian Peltasts' falchions proved lethal in the cramped space, severing limbs and arteries. The Crimson militia broke and fled, causing a stampede where many fell from the walls. Seeing the carnage, Eurycpus and Pleiades retreated, allowing the mercenaries to seize the gate area. Antorus, heartbroken, ordered the survivors to fall back to the southern Acropolis for a final stand. As the mercenaries opened the gates, their comrades poured in. "We've taken the city," a soldier cheered to Temasian. Wounded but triumphant, Temasian realized his plan had succeeded. He had learned of the grappling hooks from his time with the Dionian League and secretly had them forged in Heraclea. By feinting at the north and west, he forced the Crimsons to shift their defense, allowing Tulikexi's Peltasts to scale the undefended east wall. Temasian met Cleaner at the west gate to coordinate the pursuit of the routed defenders. The mercenaries soon spiraled out of control, looting and pillaging. Temasian was furious. The battle wasn't over, and the remaining Crimsons held the Acropolis. The soldiers ignored his orders, caught in a frenzy. Temasian cursed, feeling the same frustration I once faced. Tuolakexi advised, let them vent. We can blockade the Acropolis and regroup later. I'm not worried about the Crimizens, Temasian snapped. I'm worried about Croton. Cleaner analyzed the situation. Even if they sent word, it would take hours for Croton to mobilize. They won't attack at night. By tomorrow, we'll have sent word to the Dionian Senate. Empty. My real concern, Cleaner added, is whether Dionia will accept us as allies after this. I don't know, Temasian admitted. But we have to gamble. If we want security, we must align with Dionia. Cleaner sighed. I hope Agathias can persuade me. If Croton comes, we'll pose as Dionian troops to buy time, Temasian declared. For now, secure the city, lock up the citizens, and set scouts to the south. Cleaner smiled bitterly. We can't enforce strict discipline like I did in Persia. The men have lost too many brothers. They need to vent. We must be patient. Mocked me for my methods in Persia, Temasian sighed. Today, I realize I was the fool. Once we stabilize, we must enforce military law. Temasian sent messengers to recall the officers and led his guard to the Acropolis to demand surrender. The Crimizens refused. A standoff ensued until afternoon. As the mercenaries prepared siege engines, the trapped Crimizens wept, preparing to die with their city. Suddenly, a commotion broke out in the enemy camp. Croton's army is at the north gate. Cleaner gasped in disbelief. Tuolakexi was stunned, but our scouts saw nothing in the south. A guard captain shouted, It's true. They're forming up to attack. Temasian turned pale. They must have arrived by sea, just like us. How many? Cleaner asked, dreading the answer. 4,000 or 5,000, the captain replied. All eyes turned to Temasian. In the face of disaster, Temasian asked, Brothers, do we retreat? Looking at the Acropolis, Cleaner roared in defiance. We aren't Crimizens. We can hold these walls until tomorrow. Temasian, you said we had to gamble our lives to rule Crimisa. I'd rather die than return to the Dionian League and be mocked. I'm with you. We can hold off the Crotonians. Tuolakexi growled, echoing the sentiment of the officers and men. Agreed. We fight Croton to the end, the others shouted. Temasian steeled himself and ordered. Cleaner, Tuolakexi, gather the scattered soldiers and get to the walls immediately. Yes. Pasakizi, take 200 men to guard the Acropolis. If any Crimizens emerge, kill them all. Consider it done, leader. The rest of you, follow me to the north gate. Let's show the Crotonians our strength. Temasian bellowed. Roar. The mercenaries howled, their morale reignited. Temasian was a capable commander, but his jealousy and ambition blinded him. He saw Crimisa as a weak, neutral target for plunder, failing to grasp the complex political dynamics of Magna Graecia or Croton's protective stance toward its neighbor. Before Dionia's rise, Croton ignored Crimisa. But after Dionia's expansion, seizing Nerulum, incorporating Laos, and securing trade routes, Croton grew anxious. Crimisa's strategic position as a buffer became vital, leading Croton to court them fervently over the last 6 months. Thus, when Crimisa was attacked, they immediately sought Croton's aid. Croton, fearing a Dionian offensive, mobilized 10,000 citizen soldiers, even though the envoy reported only 2,000 enemies. Temasian, assuming the relief force would come from the north, focused his defenses there. He was caught off guard when a second Crotonian fleet entered the Umbria River, landed 5,000 troops at the unguarded port, seized the south gate, crushed Pasakizi's detachment, and linked up with the Crimizens to strike from the rear. Outnumbered and trapped in a pincer movement, the mercenaries lost all will to fight. Temasian and Cleaner were left powerless. As the Crotonians attacked from the south, the mercenaries offered only token resistance before breaking into a panicked rout. Watching his men being slaughtered like livestock, just as they had treated the Crimizens, Temasian felt the cold, desolate weight of poetic justice. Temasian, hurry. Let's break out to the north. Cleaner urged. Temasian shook his head, looking north with a bitter smile. I lost this game after all. He drew his blade and slit his own throat. Cleaner, unable to mourn, led a few men to scale the walls with grappling hooks, hoping to escape the chaos. They were pursued relentlessly by vengeful Crimizens and Crotonians. Most were killed or captured. Cleaner and Tuolakexi were eventually cornered and beheaded. Interrogations revealed the truth. These were mercenaries from Asia Minor and Ionia who had served under me in Persia and lived in Dionia, acting on their own initiative. Despite the lack of official Dionian involvement, Croton's leaders saw a perfect pretext. They concluded that unless they were willing to coexist with a rapidly expanding Dionia, they must strike now while the alliance was still young. The Senate passed the war resolution easily, with even the moderate Lysias offering no opposition, recognizing the existential threat Dionia posed. Aristola's spies in Croton's harbor quickly reported the massive troop mobilization. The next morning, when the mercenary envoy arrived, I already knew of the Crotonian reinforcements and correctly deduced that Temasian's force was doomed. Pike pleaded, "Lord Davos, Temasian has taken Crimissa. We wish to join the Dionian League and request immediate reinforcements." I replied grimly, "Pike, you're too late. 10,000 Crotonians sailed yesterday. They will arrive by afternoon. I don't believe Temasian can hold 10,000. Pike went pale. "I have scouts out. I will know the situation by noon," I added. "Perhaps they are still holding." Pike begged, "Leader, for the sake of our shared past, please send troops to save them. If you wait, it will be too late." I felt a pang at the word leader, but shook my head. I cannot act alone. The Senate must approve it. Without confirmation, sending troops into Crimson territory would violate our treaty and trigger a war with Croton. Ignoring the logic, Pike shouted, "You're the Archon for life. You decide. Save our brothers." I sighed, signaling a servant to lead him away. "Rest. I will notify you when I have news." Pike shoved the servant aside, screaming, "Davos, you'd be dead in Persia without Temasian. You're ungrateful. You hide behind Senate approval while our brothers die." I grew angry. They had lied about going to Syracuse, attacked Crimissa, and tried to make Dionia their scapegoat. Now, after failing, they demanded help without a hint of remorse. Deeming the simple-minded mercenary unworthy of further debate, I ordered my guards to remove him. Calixituoia, heavily pregnant, descended the stairs with Asuna's help. I heard shouting. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "You should be resting." Calixituoia touched her belly. The baby wouldn't stop kicking, so I woke up. I pressed my face to her stomach, whispering, "Behave, little one, and let your mother rest." "He kicked me," Chris exclaimed happily. "He's so lively, he must be a boy." Asuna laughed. "Naughty little one," I said, gently patting her belly. "Chris, let's take a walk in the courtyard." They both wore expressions of pure happiness. Pike, having been expelled from my residence, immediately regretted his actions. Finding the doors barred, he sought out Felicius and the others. Felicius, Capus, and Antonius either avoided him or apologized, claiming they could offer no assistance. Agathias finally explained, "Because the mercenaries caused trouble, Lord Davos is under immense pressure in the Senate. Temasian's unauthorized attack on Crimissa has led Thurii elders like Polixenes to accuse Davos of using the League for personal gain. This is the harshest criticism he's faced as Archon. He cannot risk deploying troops now." Pike realized they had severely underestimated the situation. By noon, news arrived. The mercenary force had been completely annihilated. I sat in silence, sighing deeply. I knew this was far from over. That afternoon, a ship from Croton docked, carrying General Lysias of Croton and Chief General Antorus of Crimissa. The arrival of the bodies of Temasian and Cleaner caused the mercenary-aligned senators to grieve, setting a tense, somber tone for the Senate meeting. Antorus tearfully recounted the mercenaries' atrocities in Crimissa, lamenting the suffering of his people and questioning if they had somehow offended Ares. Lysias, noticing the unease among the Dionian senators, stood up. He embraced Antorus and addressed the Senate. "As an envoy of Croton, I must state that our reinforcements saved Crimissa from a band of thieves. These mercenaries, who fought alongside Lord Davos in Persia and were invited here to register as Dionian citizens, are the culprits. Is this not true?" "It is," I admitted bluntly. Lysias pressed on. "The prisoners confessed that they were ordered by the Dionian League to raid Crimissa and force it into an alliance." "Lies. Nonsense." Amintas, Dracos, and Agathias shouted, rising to their feet. Facts are facts, Lysias retorted, pointing to the bodies at the docks. You have violated the truce with Croton, and you cannot deny it. Antorus pointed at me, cursing, since you foreigners arrived, Magna Graecia has known no peace. You are aggressive invaders. Crimissa demands justice, and Dionia must be punished. The hall erupted in chaos. I stood and walked toward Antorus, sneering. I intended to express our apologies and offer compensation, despite Dionia's lack of involvement. As Antorus tried to interrupt, I roared, silence, startling him into stillness. I see now that you came not for the truth, but to suppress us. State your demands. Let us see how harsh they are. My preemptive strike stunned Lysias and refocused the senators. Speak, Crotonian. Let us see how greedy you are. Amintas and Scombras shouted, their guilt replaced by shared defiance. Lysias, realizing I was a formidable opponent, cleared his throat. The Croton Alliance and Crimissa demand 500 talents in compensation for the losses suffered. 500 talents. You're insane, Mercis yelled. Ignoring him, Lysias continued. Furthermore, to prevent further aggression, we demand the dissolution of the Dionian League, the independence of Amyndalara and Nerulum, and the abolition of the Alliance. The hall exploded. Senators cursed, and the hot-tempered Amintas and Scombras had to be restrained from attacking Lysias. The scene was pure bedlam. Lysias and Antorus watched coldly until I stepped forward. You hear our answer, I declared firmly. We refuse. That means war, as you broke the treaty first, Lysias stated. Then let it be war. That is why you came, is it not? I replied, dismissing their fabricated grievances. Lysias, unsettled by my calm, insisted. I speak of war between Croton and Dionia. I smiled, turning to my senators. Do we fear war with Croton? The senators roared back. Great. We've been waiting to crush them. We defeated them once. We can do it again. This time, we will burn Croton to the ground. Faced with such high morale, Lysias felt a surge of unease. Cunigarata, record these demands. We shall use them in the next negotiation, I said. Next negotiation? Lysias asked, confused. Yes, after the war ends. Lysias felt a chill. He saw the burning resolve in my eyes. After the envoys left, the hall remained electric, though the local senators expressed concern over the impending conflict. Cunigarata voiced the general anxiety. Can we really defeat Croton? They have been a powerhouse in Magna Graecia for decades with a massive alliance and an army of 30,000 to 40,000. They also possess 25 triremes, while we have none. They can easily blockade our port, and this time, they won't repeat their past mistakes of underestimating us. I sensed the fear, especially among the Thurians, haunted by Croton's history of destroying their city. Before I could respond, Polixenes interrupted. I told you to expel those damned mercenaries. Now we face Croton's retaliation. We must hold those who indulge them accountable. Agathias and others glared at him. Am I wrong? Polixenes retorted defiantly. Burkos urged his friend. War has begun. Arguing is pointless. We must unite to survive, not create divisions. It is precisely because this caused the war that we must investigate to prevent future occurrences. Polixenes insisted stubbornly. Antonius rose. As Ephor, I have received complaints. While Burkos and Plyzenas have been apologizing to citizens, others who were Neancis's main assistants and bear responsibility for the city's destruction still strut through the Senate without remorse. The people demand an investigation. Polixenes' face drained of color. I asked sharply, Polixenes, do you still think we should investigate this now? I. Polixenes trembled under my gaze. Antonius, as Burkos said, we must unite for this existential war. Let us shelve other matters for now. My calm voice acted as a reprieve. Polixenes collapsed onto his bench in relief. Antonius cast a look of disdain at Polixenes and replied, As you command, Archon. I turned to the Senate. Apologies for the interruption. You may not realize our true military strength. Scombras, do you think our citizen soldier count is still just 5,000? Scombras chuckled, stroking his beard. Certainly not. Amyndalara alone has over 6,000, including reserves. The total must be much higher. I deferred to the military officer, Felicius, who stood. I will announce the figures for Thurii, Amendolara, and Nerulum. These exclude citizens over 45 and those in protected professions like engineers and scholars. The senators leaned in, attentive. Amendolara has 5,500 trained citizens, Nerulum 4,300, and Thurii 14,800. Of these, 7,000 are full citizens, the rest are reserves. Last December, the Archon ordered them organized into 3 legions. The first legion, led by Kapus, consists of Amendolara veterans and reserves, our strongest force. The second legion, led by Drax, is comprised of Thurii citizens and reserves. The third legion, led by Hieronymus with Bagul as 1st Battalion Captain, consists of Nerulum citizens and reserves. Each legion has 7,000 regulars, totaling 21,000, plus 3,600 reserves, totaling 24,600. Additionally, Lades leads a 300-man cavalry unit. I added, we can also mobilize 10,000 to 20,000 trained freemen as peltasts. Laos and Castron provide further support. We can field nearly 50,000 men. Even with garrison requirements, our strength now rivals Croton's. We will no longer be outnumbered. The senators erupted in cheers. As for the sea, I told Cunagurata, we cannot stop their fleet, but they can only blockade. If they enter the Krathus River, we will annihilate them. Our cavalry will monitor the coast to prevent landings. Land combat will decide this war. Empty. Cunagurata relaxed, noting, this war will be prolonged. We must secure food supplies for tens of thousands of soldiers. Maligi volunteered. I will go to the market to halt wheat trading and buy up all flour to prevent price gouging. I also suggest buying reserves from Heraclea. I agreed, and Mercis reluctantly accompanied Maligi to the treasury. Burkos suggested, it is planting season. I propose we pause mining and use the thousands of state slaves to farm the citizens' land, while offering incentives for freemen to assist. I approved. Cornelius, Cunagurata, Wisaba, and Hemin work with Burkos to draft a plan to ensure our agriculture and livestock are protected. Understood, they replied. Felicius, issue the mobilization order. Notify Laos and Castron to send reinforcements. Tell Castron to strengthen their defenses and burn the floating bridges on the Trianta River. Felicius hesitated, knowing the river could be forded, but obeyed. I will see to it immediately. Plyzenas, I said apologetically, we must pause the temple construction and divert all treasury funds to the war. I understand and agree, Plyzenas replied. I addressed the Senate. Croton has destroyed cities on the Cyberus plain 3 times. They fear our rise and seek to crush us in the cradle. This war is unavoidable. We must unite, defeat this enemy, and secure the future of the Dionian League. To war, shouted the mercenary-turned-senators Capus, Antonius, and Amyntas. Fight to the death, echoed Scambras and Proxylaus. Thurii shall not fall again, declared Burkos and Ansitanos. We Lacanians will defend the league, vowed Wisaba and Hemin. Even the hesitant Cunagurata and Cornelius pledged their full support. The great bell, intended for the Temple of Hades, was rung for the first time. Cavalry riders galloped out to deliver orders to the allied cities. Citizens heard the tolling, initially confused. Patrols shouted through the streets. Citizens, attention! War has begun. All trained citizens report to the square immediately. The same call echoed across the Cyberus plain. Despite the suddenness, the months of strict training ensured discipline. Citizens prayed, hugged their families, grabbed their gear, and marched toward Victory Square. Teletus, watching from the shadows, sent a report to Croton detailing the mobilization and the panic at the port. Teletus felt a pang of regret. He had grown fond of the city's vibrancy and its people. He wished he could stay, but he was a man of Croton. Lysias, meanwhile, sailed to Castron. Castron was unaware of the war. When Lysias announced the conflict, the Castron leadership was stunned. Lysias threatened, Croton brings 40,000 men, the largest force in Magna Graecia. Defect to us, or be destroyed. Castron had thrived under the Dionian League, enjoying trade, security, and respect without the burden of tribute. They felt a sense of stability they hadn't known for a century. Amicles, the chief general, politely refused. Per our treaty, we cannot sign separate agreements. We are bound to the League. Lysias left, frustrated. Soon, Dionysian cavalry arrived, promising 20,000 reinforcements. Amicles felt reassured and began fortifying the city. Lysias, seeing the smoke from the burning Triana bridges, realized Castron's resolve and grew more determined to see Croton crush Dionia. Lysias sailed south to Crimissa, where the Croton fleet awaited. Upon hearing the news, they immediately set sail for Dionia. Meanwhile, I sent Plyzenas to Tarentum to request naval aid. Tarentum, influenced by Diomedes, refused. They were preoccupied with a conflict against the Messapians and could not spare ships, though they offered to sell grain to Dionia. Note: historical context on Magna Graecia populations. Thurii likely had over 200,000 people, Tarentum and Croton likely 250,000 plus each. The total population of Magna Graecia exceeded 1.5 million. Note: Dionia's population is estimated at 250,000, allowing for a mobilization of 40,000 to 50,000 troops. Empty, Plyzenas saw no Tarentine ships in the harbor, confirming their absence. He pleaded for even a token force to deter Croton. He hoped a few ships would bluff Croton into caution. Tarentum remained unmoved, and Plyzenas returned empty-handed. Upon his return, the Croton fleet arrived, severing trade routes and plunging the port into panic. Olivarus and his patrols arrived to restore order. I, hearing of Tarentum's refusal, pondered and asked my clerk, Aristocratides, didn't the Spartan envoy visit Tarentum? Yes, Aristoteles reported. Sparta urged Tarentum to break our alliance and lead the opposition against us, but the Tarentine Senate refused. It still had an effect. I sighed with a cold smirk. Tarentum wants to watch the tigers fight from the mountain. Fine, we will win this war on our own. Tell Aristoteles to close the net on the Croton spy. Understood. The Dionians closed the port. Teletus, expecting this, had already arranged to pass intelligence to Crotonite scouts at a specific beach near the Crathis River mouth every night. As I wrote my secret letter, the door burst open and 4 or 5 men rushed in. Panicked, Teletus clutched the papyrus. Before he could shout, he was pinned down, his hand pried open, and the scroll seized. His face turned pale. 10,000 armed men entered the camp this afternoon. 1,000 hoplites guard the port, and Amandalara's citizen soldiers are en route. A voice boomed. Teletus, your intelligence is accurate. No wonder Croton kept you here for 6 months. How do you like the city? Teletus's heart sank. He realized the Dionians had been watching him all along. As he was hauled up, he saw a refined, tall, middle-aged man observing him with interest. What do you want with me? Teletus asked, his voice dry. The man didn't answer, instead holding up a crudely carved wooden knife. Teletus's eyes widened in horror. What have you done to my child? He's only 7. By Hera, spare him. I'll do anything. He broke down, sobbing. The man spoke coldly. Your family is in Croton under our surveillance. I am Aristoteles, intelligence officer for Archon Davos. You have a choice. Work for Dionia, and we will rescue your family and provide medical care for your wife. Refuse, and you die. Your wife perishes in poverty, and your son becomes a slave. Choose. At dusk, Croton's chief general Milan received a report. Thurii was mobilizing. For 1,000 citizens gathered in Victory Square, 1,000 soldiers occupied the port, and cavalry patrolled the coast. Milan, wary of Dionia, had mobilized immediately after crushing the mercenaries at Crimissa. He gathered 20,000 Crotonites, 3,000 from Asprostum, 2,000 from Cilicium, and 1,000 from Terina. He excluded Colonia to guard against the Locri alliance. To seize the initiative, Milan pushed his allies to march with unprecedented speed, refusing to wait for the usual sluggish Greek preparations. Locri, eager to see Croton and Dionia clash, sent envoys, but Croton's naval blockade forced them to take a long, circuitous route through Sicily and Tarentum. I was analyzing intelligence with my generals when Aristocratides whispered to me. I nodded. Let them in. Brothers, I announced to the room. Xantiparis and Tormid are here. The room fell silent. The 2 men entered, looking anxious and stunned by the gathering. I smiled. We were just about to send for you. Join us and share your insights on Croton. They knelt, apologetic. Lord Davos, we are sorry. We brought war upon Dionia. Temasian and Cleaner kept pressuring us to leave, but we never expected this. Their actions are not your fault, I interrupted. You chose to stay, proving you identify with Dionia. Now, prove your loyalty on the battlefield. Show the people of Dionia that our trust was well placed. Davos is right, the others cheered. Let's fight together and avenge Temasian's betrayal. We are finally fighting together again. Amintas and Antonius welcomed them warmly, lifting the weight from their shoulders. Note, as Croton marches, Volume 4 nears its end. Will Dionia survive? See the next volume, Hegemon of Southern Italy. I stopped writing my previous novel, From City-State to Empire, right at this point. Rewriting it now fulfills a long-held wish. The next morning, reinforcements from Cilicium and Turina arrived. Croton received reports that 4,000 troops reached Thurii and 8,000 citizens were mobilizing, though no further action was taken. Milan pushed the Senate to approve an immediate attack. He led 27,000 troops, 20,000 hoplites, 6,500 light infantry, and 800 cavalry, plus thousands of support staff. The fleet took 3 hours to load. By noon, they sailed north, picking up 500 more men at Crimissa, totaling 27,500 combatants. Fearing the Dionian cavalry mentioned in the reports, Milan avoided landing near Castron, choosing the same beach where the mercenaries had landed days prior. The landing was chaotic. Without a pier, men and horses waded ashore while slaves hauled supplies. By the time the troops were organized, it was dusk. Milan ordered a fortified camp and strict sentry duty. Remembering Miling's defeat, Milan felt victory was certain if he advanced steadily. He planned to take Castron tomorrow as a forward base, then drifted to sleep. In the Dionian camp, I, Felicius, Capus, Drax, and Lades analyzed the situation. Felicius pointed to a map. Croton has landed 30,000 troops south of Castron. They attack tomorrow. 30,000. Lades gasped. They've emptied their city. So what? Drax shouted. If the 3rd Legion arrives, we'll have 30,000 too. We can beat them. Capus looked at me. Do we really march to Castron without the 3rd Legion? We have no choice, I said. If we wait, we lose Castron and our reputation. We must use the Trionta River to our advantage. Felicius hesitated. Will Milan, an experienced general, really cross the river blindly? He's been fed false information, I replied. If he doesn't take the bait, we retreat to Thurii for a defensive war. He'll take it. Drax insisted. How many cavalry? Lades asked. 800, Felicius answered. Lades clenched his fist, hoping my tactics would hold. Brothers, I said, return to your units. Hades will protect us. Tomorrow, all will go well. Yes. The night passed peacefully. At dawn, Milan received word. No reinforcements had reached Castron. Only 3,000 men. Milan believed Apollo was smiling on him. He planned to cross the Trionta, crush the small force at Castron, and then face the main Dionian army. Milan and Philadelphus finalized the crossing plan. Milan led 22,000 men northwest. Philadelphus led 5,000 north. There were 2 crossing points, a shallow, flat one used by me previously, and a deeper, shorter one near Castron. Philadelphus would feint to distract the enemy, while Milan crossed at the main point. Milan's army stretched out in an 8-column formation for miles long. Milan listened to the rhythmic sound of marching, confident. He imagined forcing the northern cities to relocate and, if all went well, destroying Thurii for the 4th time. General, our scouts were ambushed by enemy cavalry. For dead, 2 escaped. Did they see anything? Thousands of enemies moving along the north bank. Milan paused. Has Philadelphus arrived? Not yet. Slow the march. Tell Philadelphus to make more noise. And recall the cavalry. No need to waste them. Yes. Milan looked toward the woods. He remembered the carnage he had cleared there after the peace treaty. A scene he would never forget. Milan tightened his reins, vowing to avenge Croton's shame. His troops emerged from the woods onto the high, flat wilderness where the Trionta River narrowed, making it impassable by foot. the very reason Mylingzusi had camped there. Enemies. Look, enemies! The soldiers near the bank cried out in agitation. Across the Triontu, a fully armed Dionian force was marching rapidly westward along the riverbank. Milan wasn't worried. The enemy force appeared small, consistent with intelligence reports that fewer than 4,000 Dionians were at Castron. With Philadelphus also needing defense, Milan doubted they could muster enough men to block his crossing. The Trionta widened here to 30 or 40 meters, slowing its current and depth. Milan deployed his 22,000 troops, including 2,000 peltasts, into a dense, 10-rank deep formation spanning over 2 miles. Opposite them, the 5,000 Dionians were spread thin. Milan was certain his massive, heavy phalanx would easily shatter their sparse line. Advance. Milan commanded his trumpeter from the rear center. The trumpet call echoed. Milan kept his 2,000-man reserve stationary, confident in his numerical superiority. Kolbus, a veteran of forced labor after his previous capture, marched with the phalanx, driven by a desire for revenge and the spoils needed to clear his family's debts. The riverbed was treacherous with slippery, uneven cobblestones. As they approached the water, Kolbus saw the enemy line erupt with activity and instinctively raised his shield. Clang! Dionian arrows struck his bronze shield, harmlessly bouncing off as he stepped into the water. "Watch your heads," his officer shouted. Kolbus looked up to see a swarm of black dots descending. "Damn it, it's a volley." He shielded his head, then heard the officer scream, "Watch your front." Encumbered by heavy armor, the soldiers' reactions were sluggish. A stray arrow pierced Kolobus's linen cuirass, though it lacked the kinetic energy to do more than graze his skin. A comrade nearby was struck in the unprotected thigh and collapsed, bleeding into the river. Kolbus could only watch as the man struggled and drowned. The Dionians were using a lethal mix of direct and indirect fire. "Move forward. Keep moving," the officers roared. The water was only knee-deep, but the slippery stones made movement difficult. The soldiers crouched, using their shields as overhead cover, and slowly regained their formation as they waited. Near the center, Kolbus noticed enemy troops rushing to the water's edge, barely 20 meters away, their spear tips glinting. He instinctively sank lower into the water. "Watch for javelins," the officers bellowed, their voices urgent. A whistling sound tore through the air. A heavy javelin slammed into a comrade's shield, piercing the wood and pinning his arm, knocking him backward into the men behind. Only quick intervention prevented them from drowning in the shallow water. The Crotonian vanguard was in chaos. The rearguard peltasts finally returned fire, their arrows forcing the Dionian javelin throwers to retreat. Milan was surprised by the Dionians' tactical precision and the high proportion of peltasts, but he remained confident. "General, our troops have reached the bank," his men cheered. Despite the success, the floating corpses and the soldiers' relieved expressions proved the Dionian peltasts were far more dangerous than anticipated. "Sound the drums. Don't let them escape," Milan ordered, seeing the enemy peltasts retreating through gaps in their own lines. A deafening, high-pitched trumpet blast erupted from the enemy side, sounding as if played by a dozen trumpeters at once. Milan was stunned. Could the Dionians have more than 6,000 men? He and his officers stared intently at the rear of the enemy beachhead. The rhythmic thump-thump of war drums reached Kolbus, lifting his spirits. "Attack! Attack!" the officers shouted, their voices filled with renewed excitement. The Crotonian soldiers invoked Apollo and charged forward. Suddenly, a crimson banner rose behind the enemy lines. A massive, dense formation of Dionian troops appeared, charging toward their comrades. The sight of those rising banners triggered traumatic memories for the former captives like Kolbus. A trap. The realization rippled through the Crotonian ranks, shattering their morale. They hesitated at the water's edge, watching as the Dionian main force consolidated. Milan's mind went blank. He had been deceived. He realized too late that ordering a river crossing in the face of a massive enemy force was a catastrophic blunder. Retreating now would be suicide. The Dionians would slaughter them as they turned back. Forcing himself to stay calm, Milan shouted, "Sound all trumpets. Beat all drums. Charge. We must cross the river to win." Messengers spurred their horses into the water, relaying the desperate command. Urged on by the drums, the officers led the charge. The Crotonians accelerated, but the Dionians had already reformed. As they closed to within 20 meters, the enemy suddenly stopped. The front rank crouched, and a forest of spear tips appeared from behind. Kolbus realized what was coming and dove for cover. Whoosh! A storm of javelins tore through the air, followed by screams. The Crotonian vanguard was decimated, their formation shattered. The Dionians launched a second volley. At such close range, the heavy javelins were devastating. As the Crotonians scrambled, the Dionians surged forward, shields bashing and spears thrusting. The Crotonian phalanx, stuck half in and half out of the water, was being pushed back by the sheer force of the Dionian line. Milan felt his heart stop as the javelins rained down. Dionian heavy infantry using javelins? Milan cursed his negligence. This was a well-trained, tactically sophisticated army. Damn them, his subordinate cried. They have so many heavy infantry. The reinforcements from Nerulum and Laos must have arrived. Milan realized the enemy line was as long as his own. Could they really have 20,000 men? He calculated the logistics. The road from Thurii to Nerulum and Laos was under construction. It should have taken 6 days to mobilize and return. The war had only been declared 4 days ago. Where were these troops coming from? Milan suddenly remembered. The registered freemen. He recalled reports of Dionia training their freemen. The Crotonian Council had mocked them for it, but it was working. Those freemen were likely armed with the very gear captured from previous Crotonian defeats. Milan realized that if Thurii had deployed its freemen, they were likely throwing everything they had into this battle. Eutydemosi, Milan shouted, his spirit reigniting. General, take these 2,000 men and join Philadelphus in the east. But you said to reinforce the center. Follow orders. Tell Philadelphus the enemy force isn't as large as it seems. He must cross the river at any cost, then flank the Dionians. The battle depends on him. Eutydemosi understood and rushed off. Milan dismounted, grabbed a shield and spear, and waded into the river to rally his men. He reasoned that since the Dionian heavy infantry were mostly former freemen, they couldn't possibly master phalanx warfare in 6 months. He was certain his veterans could hold until Philadelphus arrived. Behind the Dionian center, a massive banner bearing the golden letters I and a statue of Hades flew high. As Archon, I served as the supreme commander of the Dionian League forces. I watched the enemy movements closely. Commander, a detachment is moving downstream, reported Aristocratides, a talented freeman I was grooming as a clerk. Tormid, I called out. I await your command, Commander. Tormid replied with deep respect. Despite initial opposition from my council, who wanted to wait for reinforcements, I had insisted on pushing the front to Castron, leveraging my immense prestige to win them over. I had mobilized every available citizen and freeman, leaving Thurii and Amendalara virtually undefended. It was a massive gamble, but one I was willing to take. Empty, the Crotonians walked right into the trap. The Dionian army, bolstered by new tactics and the element of surprise, had inflicted heavy casualties on the renowned Crotonian forces and held the upper hand. Tormid, formerly the Persian expedition's herald, had only glimpsed my tactical genius. Now, witnessing me orchestrate the Thurii campaign, using decoys to deceive the enemy fleet, executing silent night marches, and controlling the Trionta river crossings, Tormid was awestruck. I treated warfare not as a brute clash, but as a refined art of deception, mobility, and meticulous planning. Tormid realized this strategic foresight was why I rose to lead a powerful alliance, while men like Temasian perished in obscurity. I ordered Tormid to alert Xanaparis, Epitenes, Zippite, and Lades to prepare for the enemy's imminent river crossing. Tormid rode off, his initial skepticism replaced by absolute faith in my unconventional tactics. Philadelphus was shocked to learn from Eutydemosi that Milan's forces were struggling against a 20,000-strong Daunian ambush across the upper Trionto. Fearing a similar trap, Philadelphus hesitated, but the urgency of Milan's plight forced his hand. Unable to cross the shallow ford with his entire force, Philadelphus organized his 6,000 men. 3,000 heavy hoplites led the way, followed by 500 cavalry and 3,000 light armored infantry. Despite minor losses from Daunian projectiles, the hoplites secured the bank, and the rest of the army crossed safely. Cavalry commander Arisoxus asked if they should pursue the retreating Daunian light infantry. Philadelphus refused, prioritizing the rescue of Milan and ordering the cavalry to guard the flanks. As they turned west, a loud war horn sounded from the north. Arisoxus reported a force of 6,000 to 7,000 Daunians approaching, consisting of archers, slingers, peltasts, and a few hundred cavalry. Philadelphus was stunned to hear there were no hoplites. Relieved, he ordered his army to form a battle line, confident he could crush this light infantry force before proceeding. Arisoxus confirmed the enemy had only 400 cavalry. Philadelphus, confident with his superior numbers, ordered Arisoxus to defeat the enemy cavalry and then strike the enemy center's flank. Arisoxus complied. As the Daunians approached, Philadelphus was shocked by their appearance. They were poorly equipped, wearing simple linen tunics, looking more like conscripted freemen than soldiers. Philadelphus smiled, convinced Milan was right. Daionia was desperate for manpower and easily defeated. The Daunian force halted 500 meters away to reorganize. Tormid remarked that the Crotonians would be shocked to realize they were being lured into a total annihilation trap. Epitenes declared this battle would prove that light infantry, with proper strategy, could defeat heavy hoplites. Tormid remained anxious about the cavalry engagement. Zippite expressed total devotion to me, the god favorite of Hades, confident the enemy would fall for the trap. Epitenes ordered the troops to spread out their formation to improve mobility and range. Zippite and Lades followed suit, causing the Daunian line to expand significantly in size. Philadelphus, trapped by traditional thinking, kept his formation dense. This resulted in the Daunian line arcing around his smaller, tighter formation. Unconcerned, Philadelphus relied on his superior cavalry to break the enemy, ordering Arisoxus to detach and engage the Daunian horsemen. Philadelphus planned for his light armored infantry to exploit the cavalry's success, while his hoplites pinned the enemy right flank. Empty, the Daunian center and right were composed of 3,000 light infantry each, mostly freemen led by veteran officers from the 1st and 2nd Legions. Lades, leading the 400 cavalry, felt the pressure of his role as the linchpin of the battle. Sorikos, a 50-year-old veteran and former teamster, reassured Lades that his experience made him more than capable of leading a cavalry squad. Lades nodded, readying for combat. A young officer, Cuccius, worried if the rest of the men were prepared. Lades smiled, telling Cuccius that these men were seasoned veterans of the Persian campaign who had faced far greater threats. The young cavalry sergeant protested, but someone shouted, "Look, our slingers are attacking." Without a signal, the slingers slipped from the ranks and ran toward the Crotonians. From 200 meters away, they unleashed a rain of stones, catching the enemy mid-formation and causing bloody chaos. Shameless Daunians. Apollo will punish your deceit. Philadelphus cursed, caught off guard by the sudden assault. Attack! Attack now, he bellowed. As the horn sounded, Arisoxus pointed his spear forward. Cavalry, advance! The 800 Crotonian cavalry formed an inverted fan, spurring their horses into a steady trot. Late's cavalry formed a loose wedge, led by 2 veterans carrying red flags. Seeing the enemy move, Lade steadied his nerves, patted his horse, and shouted, "Advance!" The Daunian cavalry accelerated, controlling their speed to maintain formation. Unlike the Crotonians, they held reins with both hands, spears hooked, ensuring they wouldn't fall before contact. Under the spring sun, the horses galloped, kicking up dust as they covered 500 meters in moments. At 50 meters, Lades roared, "Turn right." Sorikos echoed, "Turn left." The flag-bearers split, leading the 2 wings. The wedge formation allowed the Daunians to split cleanly, bypassing the charging enemy while maintaining cohesion despite the dust. The Crotonian vanguard, stunned by the maneuver, had no choice but to charge through, unable to stop without risking a pile-up. As they passed, they were met by a wall of sharp spears emerging from the morning mist. "Hoplites!" the Crotonians screamed. The collision was catastrophic. Horses and men were impaled or crushed. Arisoxus struggled to control his panicked mount amidst the carnage, his formation collapsing into chaos. Arsaxis shouted orders, and his guards helped restore some semblance of order. As they turned to escape, the two wings of Daunian cavalry closed in like pincers. Arsaxis realized with horror that his cavalry was surrounded by both infantry and horsemen. "Break out to the left." "All together!" Arsaxis screamed. A thunderous horn blast drowned him out. The heavy infantry charge had begun. "Brothers, slaughter these Crotonians. Avenge Timasian!" Xantippus shouted, leading the charge. Over 1,000 mercenaries roared, rushing forward to finish the trapped enemy. The spear wall dissolved into a fluid, lethal force. The mercenaries systematically slaughtered the trapped cavalry, using coordinated strikes to pierce armor or knock riders down to be finished off. The mercenaries' efficiency was so brutal that even the Daunian cavalry kept their distance. The battle ended in a total victory. Arsaxis was dead, most Crotonians were killed or captured, and 400 horses were seized. My tactics had succeeded. Lade sent 70 men to pursue the survivors and ordered the rest toward Castron. "Hurry, retrieve the javelins." Xantippus and his mercenaries arrived, riding captured horses. "Lades, we're coming with you." Lades hesitated, but acknowledged their decisive role in the fight. Xantippus insisted, "You lack numbers. We are better at throwing javelins. Let's end this and reinforce me." Convinced, Lades agreed. "Keep up, I won't wait." "Don't worry," Xantippus laughed. Philadelphus, unaware his cavalry was destroyed, led his light infantry into a trap. As they advanced, the enemy's slingers retreated. Under a barrage of arrows and javelins, the light infantry suffered casualties but closed the distance. Suddenly, the enemy's center began to withdraw. The light infantry pursued, but the enemy maintained a constant gap, retreating at the same pace as the advance. The light armored infantry, despite their gear, were too slow to catch the unarmored enemy. Once they halted, they became targets for the enemy's ranged attacks. More concerningly, the enemy center split into 3 parts. One engaged the light infantry, while the other 2 flanked them. Attacked from the sides, the light infantry struggled to defend themselves. Philadelphus, watching his men fall, cursed the absence of his cavalry. He realized the agony of fighting light infantry. Unable to catch them, his men were merely sitting ducks. "Retreat to the left." Philadelphus shouted. His exhausted, fearful soldiers, eager to escape the arrows and stones, complied immediately. The Daunian light infantry clung to them like leeches. Philadelphus intended to link up with the heavy infantry on the left to protect his flanks, still confident in his cavalry's eventual victory. Unbeknownst to him, the enemy had lured his left-wing heavy infantry toward the northwest, widening the gap between his center and left flank. The retreating light infantry suffered heavy casualties. Forced to turn and defend with their shields, they watched their comrades being slaughtered, their morale crumbling. Suddenly, they heard thundering hooves behind them. "Cavalry! Our cavalry is here," they cheered. Philadelphus was confused. Why were they behind him? Then, a frantic cry rang out. "Javelins! They're the enemy." Hundreds of javelins whistled toward them from the rear. As a commander, Philadelphus was a prime target. Struck by 3 javelins, he died never understanding why his superior cavalry had failed. The realization that the cavalry were enemies shattered the light infantry's resolve. They scattered and were easily run down or captured by the Daunians. With the right wing and center neutralized, the Daunians focused on the heavy infantry. Surrounded by 7,000 Daunians, the 3,000 Crotonian heavy infantry were demoralized when they saw Lades parading Philadelphus's severed head. Commander Philos and his deputy, Pausanias, argued over their next move. Philos insisted on pushing forward to reach the main army and turn the tide. Pausanias argued that morale was too low and the 6-mile trek was impossible under constant assault. They split. Pausanias led 1,700 men to retreat toward the Trionta River, while Philos led 1,400 toward the west. This split confused the Daunian commanders. Lades and Zippite advocated focusing on the western force. Epitenes and Xantippus argued that the retreating force would likely surrender if pursued, allowing for a total victory. With no time to debate, the Daunian forces split to pursue both groups. The Sybarites and Tarina people, lacking strong motivation, panicked at the sight of the pursuing Dionians. Fearing the river crossing, their resolve broke. First the Tarina, then Pausarius and the Sybarites surrendered. Philas's heavy infantry struggled to advance. Despite their shields, they were vulnerable to arrows, stones, and javelins from all sides. After half an hour, they had barely moved a mile. Exhausted and bleeding, their morale shattered when Epitines and Xanthoparis returned with the captured enemy flags. Fewer than 1,000 remained combat-ready when they finally surrendered. Arsenis, a former recruit, was now a centurion leading 9 men, mostly new reserve citizens. The rapid expansion of the Dionian army highlighted the importance of trust and cohesion in a phalanx. A soldier relied on his neighbor's shield for protection, a bond forged through years of shared life in a city-state. Citizens were bound by lifelong familiarity, allowing them to act as a single unit. Empty. Dionian freemen, lacking this history, often acted selfishly. When attacked, they instinctively broke formation to defend themselves, creating gaps that the Crotonians exploited. The First Legion, depleted of veterans, struggled against the Crotonian counterattack. Arsenis fought desperately, his arms aching, constantly reminding his new recruits to hold the line or die. Remembering his mentor Ctesippus's advice, Arsenis led by example, shouting his men's names and guiding them through the chaos. These junior officers were the backbone of the Dionian defense. While the heavy infantry struggled, the Dionian light infantry, comprising veterans from Asia Minor and specialists from Rhodes, Crete, and Thrace, dominated the Crotonians. The Crotonian heavy infantry, exhausted and chilled by the river, became sluggish, making them easy targets for the Dionian ranged attacks. The battle remained a grueling stalemate. Milan remained confident, believing the Crotonian force at the river would eventually secure victory. I, however, knew the truth. The river force had been destroyed or captured, and my commanders were preparing to strike the Crotonian rear. Relieved, I teased Metones, who was pacing in frustration. Metones complained about being kept in reserve while the First Legion missed the glory of the last triumph. I promised him his chance was coming. I ordered a formation change. The first line would rotate out, replaced by the second. Metones worried that such a complex maneuver with new recruits might cause a collapse. I insisted on the training opportunity and noted that the retreat would lure the enemy further onto the shore, making their escape impossible. Satisfied, Metones prepared for battle. I ordered him to the right wing to bolster the line if the enemy broke through. Metones rallied his men. Arsenis continued to fight. The bugle call for the formation change sounded. Officers urged their men to hold on. The phalanx shifted into a fish-scale formation of small squares, allowing the front line to retreat through the gaps. Arsenis's unit remained in place, waiting for their turn. Ctesippus ordered them to guard the flanks. As neighboring units retreated, the line became jagged. Though the Crotonians surged into the gaps, the disciplined Dionian units held their ground, preventing a rout. Finally, the drums signaled their turn. Arsenis and his men retreated in good order, allowing the fresh second-line troops to take the front and form a new, dense phalanx. The Dionian formation shift succeeded without chaos, catching the Crotonians off guard. While Croton was superior in dense phalanx combat, the shift broke both sides into smaller units. Dionia's long-term training in platoon and company tactics allowed for superior flexibility and command, whereas the Crotonians, accustomed to rigid large-scale formations, fell into disarray once their command structure fractured. Milan, waiting in the river, heard the enemy's horns and drums, then felt the long stagnant front begin to advance. Hoping Philadelphus had arrived, Milan felt a surge of excitement as he reached the shore. However, the advance stalled and began to retreat. "Hold the line," Milan shouted, though he knew his cries were futile against the soldiers' exhaustion. The Crotonian army could not advance further. The Dionian front line, refreshed with second-line troops, held firm against the exhausted Crotonians, who had been fighting for 3 hours and were now incapable of offensive action. As they struggled, panicked cries erupted from the rear. "The enemy! The enemy is attacking from behind!" Milan turned to see hundreds of cavalry charging the Crotonian light infantry, followed by waves of unarmored troops unleashing volleys of arrows and javelins. Realizing Philadelphus's support was nowhere to be found, Milan's heart sank. We are defeated. As the Crotonian morale wavered, I, seeing the opportunity, roared, "All forces attack!" The Dionian charge began. 6,000 light infantry pelted the Crotonian right flank with projectiles. Caught between the fresh Dionian heavy infantry and the relentless ranged fire, the Crotonian line collapsed like an avalanche. Soldiers fled toward the south bank, turning the retreat into a slaughter. Xanthippus later recounted the horror to Ansitanos for the history of Magna Graecia. The Crotonians screamed, "Run for your lives," so loudly it drowned out our horns. They trampled each other. Those who fell in the river were crushed or drowned by their own heavy gear. It was like the expedition at the Centrites River. The Trionta River was choked with over 3,500 corpses. The retreating Crotonians found no respite. I pressed the attack, while the agile Dionian light infantry outflanked the Crotonian right, forcing mass surrenders. Light infantry handed the prisoners to the heavy infantry and continued the pursuit. Lades led 300 cavalry, crushing the fleeing ranks and forcing them into the path of the advancing light infantry. Exhausted and hopeless, many Crotonians simply collapsed or surrendered, leaving the Dionian light infantry to manage the massive influx of captives. The pursuit ended as the Crotonians fled into the marshes. The Dionian cavalry, unfamiliar with the terrain, abandoned the chase as darkness fell. The battle that decided the fate of Dionia and Croton concluded. Of the 27,000 Crotonians, 7,000 were casualties, 12,000 captured, and only 5,000 returned to Crimissa. The rest were lost in the wilderness. Milan narrowly escaped. Dionia, with 24,000 troops, suffered only 4,000 casualties, securing a brilliant victory. Amicles, chief general of Castron, had monitored the battle closely, coordinating logistics. Upon learning of the enemy's destruction, he immediately informed the council that victory was certain. The council remained skeptical, fearing Croton's long-standing dominance in Magna Graecia. An hour later, the sight of countless Crotonian corpses floating down the Trionta River confirmed the Dionian victory. Cheers erupted throughout Castron, validating their decision to support the Dionian alliance. When I returned to Castron, the city was illuminated by torches. Amicles and the citizens greeted me with such fervor that I dismounted to walk among them. "Victory to the Dionian alliance," the crowd roared. Amicles congratulated me on my incredible triumph. "It is thanks to Hades and the support of the people of Castron," I replied modestly. Amicles subtly inquired about the next move. I smiled. "A wounded lion must be hunted before it recovers. We march on Crimissa tomorrow, then on to Croton." Amicles warned that Croton might sue for peace to ransom their prisoners. I scoffed. I had considered using the 12,000 prisoners as human shields to force the surrender of Crimissa and Croton, a tactic used by nomadic conquerors. However, living in this era, I realized such a move would be viewed as treacherous and cruel by the Greeks, who valued heroic, face-to-face combat. Recalling how Sparta refused to enslave Athenian prisoners during the Peloponnesian War, I knew such a tactic would destroy my reputation. I opted to send the prisoners back to Thurii under guard, preserving my honor and long-term standing. Castron's citizens welcomed the soldiers with feasts. The troops escorting prisoners to Thurii were exhausted but proud, eager to recount their victory. The prisoners, stripped of armor to prevent escape, suffered in the cold night air, beaten by their guards whenever they faltered. Colbus, a prisoner again, comforted his comrades, believing that if they obeyed, they might survive to see Croton again. Thurii citizens stayed up all night, celebrating the return of the army and the massive number of captives. They chanted my name, crediting my leadership in the Senate for the victory. Felicius, left in charge of Thurii, felt relieved. The victory ensured Croton could no longer threaten the city. Cunegurata and other elders questioned the soldiers, savoring the revenge against their longtime rival. The soldiers were hailed as heroes, strengthening their resolve to become full citizens of Dionia. In Crimissa, Antorus was shocked to be awakened with news of Croton's defeat. He had seen their massive fleet and army of 40,000, believing it invincible. He rushed to the north gate to meet Eurycpus and Pleiades. They watched as the broken, starving Crotonian survivors stumbled into the city, begging for food. The sight filled the Crimson leaders with dread. Finally, Milan arrived, exhausted but composed. "General Milan, what now?" Antorus asked urgently. Milan only asked for food. The Crimsons watched with disdain as the soldiers ravenously devoured bread. Milan, ignoring their judgment, focused on how to manage Crimissa, the key to salvaging the situation. "We were ambushed," Milan admitted, and suffered a heavy defeat. He clenched his fists, pained by the memory of his drowning men. Dionian casualties were far lower than ours. The room fell silent in disbelief. Did they have more men? Did Tarentum intervene? Antorus demanded. "No," Milan replied. "The numbers were equal, and Tarentum did not participate." "Are you Crotonians made of flour?" Pleiades shouted in fury. Crimissa now faced a crisis. They had broken their promise to Dionia to assist Croton, and now that the gamble had failed, they were left in a precarious position. Milan glared at Pleiades, his legendary status as an Olympic champion and former Croton chief general radiating an intimidating aura. Pleiades flinched but retorted. "If Croton hadn't forced us to declare war on Dionia, promising a painful lesson, Crimissa would have remained neutral. Now that you've been crushed, what are we supposed to do?" "Exactly. We only provoked Dionia because you forced us," voices from the crowd echoed. Milan sneered internally at their hypocrisy. They had been eager enough for the spoils of war, but kept his silence to avoid further conflict. "What do you want then?" "Peace talks," Milan asked, scanning the room. "Dionia has the upper hand. They will demand more. Do you think I will spare Crimissa after avenging my mercenaries? Will I not turn you into a puppet state like Nerulum?" Milan's words cast a pall over the room, including Adalos. "Our only choice is to hold Crimissa. Dionia lacks a fleet. The sea is ours. We can resupply indefinitely. They cannot starve us out." Milan declared passionately. "Croton can still field 10,000 to 20,000 citizen soldiers. If they assault the walls, we will inflict heavy losses. Once they fail, they will be forced to negotiate, and we will regain the initiative." As the room fell into thought, Eurycpus remarked, "So, Crimissa will become the battlefield." Milan seized the moment. "Yes, but it will be defended by Crotonian soldiers. If Crimissa's citizens fear for their safety, they can evacuate to Croton by ship. We will guarantee their welfare and compensate for any property damage." Milan's proposal was airtight, subtly reminding them that with Crotonian troops occupying the city, any unauthorized peace talks would be met with force. "General Milan, Crimissa will fully support your defense against Dionia," Antorus declared on behalf of the council. The next morning, I marched 16,000 troops, 2 legions and 2 reserve cohorts, toward Crimissa. By noon, the Dionian army reached the marshlands. I ordered an engineering battalion to drain the marsh and bridge the Lakili River to secure supply lines, while 2 reserve cohorts established a camp to protect the engineers and local Castron workers. I led my men through the marsh, arriving at Crimissa by afternoon to find 5,000 Crotonian soldiers waiting on the walls. After scouting the city, I decided against an immediate assault and ordered camp construction. When the engineering captain asked for instructions, I pointed to the city. "Encircle it from the north." The engineers surveyed the terrain while Capys and Drax mobilized the troops. Soldiers turned into builders, digging trenches and raising earthworks. Even I picked up a pickaxe. Milan watched from the walls, disappointed by the lack of an immediate assault, but unnerved by the speed and proximity of the Dionian camp. Milan considered a sortie, but the sight of the disciplined Dionian heavy infantry and patrolling cavalry deterred him. He doubted his defeated troops had the stomach for a field battle. He realized I intended to lay siege, a strategy he welcomed as it bought him time. By dusk, the Dionians had dug a 3-mile trench and raised earthworks on 3 sides of the city. Despite missing their modular wooden gates due to the marsh, the speed of construction was impressive. Milan, unaware that camp construction was a standard Dionian drill, felt his soldiers' anxiety rise and resolved to act. He decided to send 500 men to raid the camp at night, hoping to exploit the fatigue of the Dionian march and boost his own troops' morale. Fearing a landing would be spotted, he chose to attack the southern side of the camp near the coast. The 500 Crotonians crept toward the camp, but a sentry spotted them by the torchlight. He quickly alerted his squad leader. "Laris, well done. Take my badge to the rear and alert the cavalry," squad leader Ketapussy ordered, handing the boy his bronze dog tag. "Understood." Laris sprinted away. Ketapussy alerted the other squads and Centurion Trotilus, then led a small force to the ramparts to assess the enemy. The Crotonians, emboldened by the silence, crossed the obstacles and approached the camp, preparing to set fires. Suddenly, the lead soldiers hit hidden pits and spiked traps, screaming in agony. Dionian soldiers swarmed from behind the tents, raining javelins on the panicked raiders, who broke and fled under pursuit. I was awakened by the noise. Marcius reported, "Commander, a Crotonian raid was repelled by the 2nd Legion's 3rd cohort. Late's cavalry is in pursuit." I visualized my camp layout. "That's Geogris's cohort on the eastern flank." "Yes, sir. Geogris and his sentries performed excellently. Reward them." I told my clerk, Aristocratides. Aristocratides recorded the order. "What of the other cohorts?" I asked. "All were alerted. There was no chaos," Marcius replied. Satisfied, I smiled. "Croton wants to raid? They are no match for us. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll be busy." Marcius left after speaking with the guards. Aristocratides remained, staring at the brazier in front of my tent. Per the military law, the brazier served as a beacon for morale and command, ensuring soldiers could always find their leader in the dark. Hearing my steady snoring, Aristocratides felt his own anxiety fade. Only a few dozen of the 500 raiders escaped back to the city. Milan was stunned. The Dionian camp's defenses were far more sophisticated than he had imagined. He finally admitted to himself that the Dionian army was truly elite. He abandoned all thoughts of sorties and focused entirely on defense. News of the crushing defeat and the 5,000 survivors reaching Crimissa shocked Croton. This time, with the experienced Milan in command, the defeat was even more devastating. Over 20,000 men were missing, their fates unknown. Grief and anger, fueled by Dionian spies, led the citizens to storm the city hall, demanding an assembly. The council was forced to convene the assembly. Citizens denounced the council's incompetence and demanded Milan be stripped of his rank and tried. They also called for peace talks to ransom the prisoners. The motion passed overwhelmingly. Just then, Milan's messenger arrived, pleading for reinforcements to defend Crimissa. Panic ensued. Everyone realized that if Crimissa fell, the Croton plain would be defenseless, ending a century of peace. The assembly agreed to send reinforcements, drafting men aged 18 to 50 and freemen. However, they lacked commanders, as all experienced officers were with Milan. When candidates were proposed, they refused, arguing, "If Milan failed, how could we, with inexperienced troops, hope to stop Davos?" A deathly silence fell over the thousands gathered. The once mighty Croton had no leaders left. Lysias stood up. "I have my differences with Milan, but I respect his service. He has defended our allies and repelled Locri. If he failed, it is not because he was careless, but because Davos is a superior strategist." His words gave the citizens pause. "Davos has won every battle since arriving in Thurii, often against the odds. Is there anyone here better suited to face him than Milan?" Lysias asked. No one stood up. "Then let Milan lead. He has learned from his defeat and will fight to the death to save our city. Put aside your grudges and act for the good of Croton." The assembly voted to reinstate Milan as commander, though he was stripped of his chief general title and slated for trial after the war. Lysias felt no relief. He knew he would soon have to face me, whose predictions were proving all too accurate. The next morning, the Dionians continued fortifying their camp and began bridging the Umbria River. Milan watched in bewilderment. Was I truly content to just lay siege? He dared not risk another sortie. By afternoon, 5,000 reinforcements arrived by sea, bringing the garrison to over 10,000. Milan met Lysias at the port. "Did the council really send you to negotiate?" "No, Milan. The assembly sent me." Milan's expression darkened. "I doubt the Dionians will agree to peace now. And if they do, the terms will be brutal." "You are right," Lysias sighed. but the families of the prisoners demand answers. We must at least try. Milan's face twitched at Lysias' words. He coughed and whispered, I heard it was your speech at the assembly that saved me from being sent back home in chains. Like the others, I wanted you to face trial for the citizens lost in this battle. Lysias replied solemnly. But Croton needs you. For the sake of the city and yourself, I hope you win some victories to pave the way for peace. Milan, ashamed, said nothing but clenched his fists. Lysias and Milan climbed the city walls. Below, the Dionian camp stretched from east to west, meticulously organized with trenches, earthen walls, palisades, and watchtowers. Even to the militarily inexperienced Lysias, the Dionian camp's defenses appeared formidable. Milan remarked, These Dionians aren't like Greeks. They don't mind dirty, exhausting labor. They built this camp in just over a day, which cost me hundreds of men during a failed raid last night. Now they're bridging the river to encircle Crimissa. Milan added loudly, With these reinforcements, I'll teach these arrogant Dionians a lesson. Matones, commanding the 1st Legion's 2nd and 3rd cohorts, led the crossing to protect the engineering battalion. Having missed the last major battle as a reserve, he was eager to prove himself. Upon reaching the south bank, he immediately set one cohort to guard and another to dig trenches. They completed the fortifications without seeing a single enemy. Empty. Cursing the timid Crotonians, Matones ordered his men to assist in bridge construction. As the bridge neared completion, scouts reported 8,000 Crotonian light infantry advancing. Matones' lethargy vanished. Men, get up. It's time to fight. The soldiers instantly sprang to action, donning gear and rushing to the earthworks with excitement, while those at the bridge returned to the lines. Soon, the Crotonians appeared. Milan, having learned that Philadelphus was defeated by Dionian light infantry, decided to mimic their tactics. He mobilized his light infantry, including sailors from the harbor, to outnumber the Dionian heavy infantry. Leading 8,000 men, Milan marched along the Umbria River toward the Dionian position. Seeing the Dionian trenches, Milan smiled, believing the fortifications would hinder the Dionians and favor his light infantry. He deployed his troops in a loose arc, surrounding the Dionian camp. At his command, archers advanced to within 100 meters and began firing. The arrow rain proved ineffective against the shielded Dionians, who joked that the Crotonians were merely resupplying them with arrows. However, this levity soon faded. As the Crotonians closed to 50 meters, their accuracy improved. Still, the Dionian shields and earthworks mitigated the damage. When Crotonian javelin throwers pushed to within 20 to 30 meters, the pressure mounted. Matones refused to hide. If they stayed behind the walls, they risked the enemy bypassing them to burn the bridge. Matones knew his duty as commander of the south bank. Javelins, he roared. Rising from behind the wall, he hurled his javelin 20 meters, piercing a Crotonian's chest before dropping back down. The Dionians retaliated with a volley of javelins, inflicting heavy casualties. Both sides began to suffer as the exchange intensified. Milan observed the battle, realizing the advantage of light infantry against heavy units. Though the Dionians were not traditional hoplites and their javelins were deadly, Milan felt the trade-off was worth it. He reasoned that trading several light infantrymen for one heavy infantryman was a favorable exchange, as Croton had plenty of sailors but few citizens to serve as hoplites. Captain Epitenes, the enemy, is attacking fiercely. Matones requests reinforcements, a messenger reported. Epitenes frowned and called for Ampialex. Present, take the slingers to support Matones, Epitenes ordered. Do not enter the camp. The cramped space will make you vulnerable. Flank the enemy and use your range to strike from the outside. Ampialex hurried to assemble his men. The Dionian Light Infantry Battalion, 7th Cohort, consisted of 3 companies, slingers, archers, and javelin throwers, totaling 1,000 men. Light infantry required specialized training, so their composition varied by region. Thracian peltasts for the 1st Legion, Thurii sailors for the 2nd, and Lacanians for the 3rd. Their loose formation made these variations manageable. Xeniaris, the peltast captain, worried that the Crotonian ships might attack the bridge if their numbers were reduced. I wish they would, Epitenes replied. Instead, they sit there, pinning us down and preventing us from reinforcing the other side. A young guard suggested, "Why don't we attack them?" Epitines cuffed him lightly. "Fool, the riverbank there is low. Attacking ships from below is suicide." "I'm not that reckless," the guard countered. "But we're on high ground with river barriers. They wouldn't dare approach us." Epitines sighed. "You're improving. It seems we're stuck in a stalemate. Protecting this bridge is proving to be a real headache." I received news of the engagement. Though surprised by Milan's all-light infantry strategy, I remained calm. "Tell Lades to place his cavalry under the 1st Legion's command. I trust Capua will drive the enemy back soon." Authorized by me, Legate Capus led 3 heavy infantry cohorts and cavalry across the river to cut off the Crotonians' retreat. Learning of incoming Dionian reinforcements, Milan chose to retreat despite his tactical advantage. The skirmish ended inconclusively. Matones suffered 500 casualties out of 2,000, while Milan lost 700 of his 8,000 men. Matones felt defeated, but Milan claimed a minor victory, believing he had delayed the Dionian siege of Crimissa. Upon returning to the city, Milan received alarming news. A massive army had arrived at the Dionian camp. Milan panicked, fearing it was reinforcements from Nerulum. In reality, 5,000 troops from Nerulum and 3,000 from the Laos alliance had arrived, swelling the Dionian front to 22,000 men. Cheers erupted in the camp as I welcomed the Laos Archon Avanogus and 3rd Legion officers, including Captain Bagul, Adjutant Assists, and Captain Lazarou. Assists apologized for their late arrival. I praised their rapid 3-day march from Nerulum, declaring they had arrived at the perfect moment for the coming battles. Empty, Bagul boasted that the 3rd Legion was eager for combat and glory. I joked that there would be plenty of fighting and urged them to report to their legate, Hieronymus, who had missed them dearly. The officers laughed, and even the stoic Hieronymus grinned. I formally thanked Avanogus for his personal leadership and support. Avanogus humbly replied that it was his duty, praising my military genius and the recent victory against Croton. I emphasized that unity was the key to their success. Avanogus agreed wholeheartedly. Assists added that the engineering battalion had nearly finished the road through the marshes, ensuring supplies would arrive by tomorrow. I was delighted. I convened a war council with Capus, Drax, Hieronymus, Bagul, Assists, and Avanogus. A large map of southern Magna Graecia lay on the table. I ordered Capus to brief the newcomers. Capus explained that 7,000 Crotonians had retreated into Crimissa. With the 1st and 2nd Legions, they had surrounded the city, but recent skirmishes suggested Crimissa had received reinforcements, bringing their strength to 14,000. The arrival of the Allies brought the Dionian force to 22,000. The officers studied the map intently. Avanogus noted the difficulty of storming a city defended by 14,000 men. Capus revealed they did not intend to storm Crimissa. Bagul was stunned, questioning how they could attack Croton otherwise. Capus explained the strategy: contain Crimissa to force Croton to split its strength, while they bypassed the city to strike the Crotonian plains. The officers pondered the plan. Avanogus worried about a sortie from the city. The others laughed. Drax confidently stated they welcomed such an attack, as the camp's defenses were ready. Assists asked if ignoring the city might prompt the enemy to retreat to Croton. Capus clarified they would maintain pressure on Crimissa to keep the enemy off balance, preventing them from concentrating their forces until the Dionians were ready to strike. Avanogus praised the brilliant, low-casualty strategy. I smiled but turned serious. Hieronymus noted the critical issue: food supplies. I confirmed that with 22,000 mouths to feed and a long, vulnerable supply line from Thurii, they had to act quickly before Crotonian ships could raid their logistics. I ordered Hieronymus to fortify the south bank and Drax to assist Avanogus in completing the encirclement. I demanded the siege lines be established by nightfall. The officers saluted. That afternoon, over 10,000 Dionian soldiers began constructing the siege works on the south bank of the Umbria River. Milan, sensing the shift in power, did not attempt another sortie. By evening, the southern camp was complete. The Dionian encampment now formed a massive semicircle around Crimissa, sealing off all land routes except for the harbor. The next morning, as Dionian soldiers refined their fortifications, The Crotonian envoy Lysias arrived at the northern camp, blindfolded, and was led into my tent. "My apologies, Lysias, for the blindfold," I said, my face devoid of sincerity, eyes gleaming like a predator. "We met 4 days ago. Have you returned with more unreasonable threats?" Ignoring the mockery, Lysias stated, "I come to negotiate a truce, Lord Davos. Croton is willing to pay reparations to end the bloodshed and restore peace to Magna Graecia." I laughed. "You Crotonians treat war like a child's game, starting and stopping at your whim." Lysias asked calmly, "What terms would Dionia accept to end the war?" I stopped pacing, my expression sharpening. "My terms remain exactly what I proposed at the Senate in Thurii." Lysias' heart sank. First, 5,000 talents of silver in reparations. Second, the dissolution of the Croton alliance. Third, the annexation of Crimissa into the Dionian League. Lysias' face paled with each point. "These terms are too harsh. Our council will never accept them." "Then we shall continue," I replied dismissively. "My soldiers are eager for more victories and the rewards that follow." "Our panic has only united us," Lysias countered firmly. "The fighting will only grow harder for you. Remember, grapes are best sold fresh. Wait too long, and they rot. No content. We shall see." I chuckled. "But be warned. Next time, the terms will be worse. And remember, Croton has enemies beyond just us." Lysias was visibly shaken. By noon, the first grain supply convoy arrived. I received a letter from Cunigarata. A Locrian envoy had arrived in Thurii, seeking an alliance against Croton, but the Senate delayed the response due to my absence. The envoy had fallen ill and was currently in the hospital. Cunigarata warned, "Locri is powerful and backed by Syracuse. If we weaken Croton too much, Locri may seize their territories, creating an even greater threat for Dionia." I also reviewed a secret report from Aristolus. Tarentum had conquered Manduria and was attacking Brundisium. Potentia was mobilizing against Gramintum. Most alarmingly, Dionysius of Syracuse had launched 80,000 infantry, 4,000 cavalry, and 400 ships against Carthage. The Mediterranean was ablaze. I stared at the numbers. Syracuse was a superpower, and with their history of interfering in Magna Graecia, I felt a chill of apprehension. After rereading the letters, I fell into deep thought. Meanwhile, back in Crimissa, Milan was furious at the harsh peace terms, but felt a pang of guilt. Milan spent the morning observing the Dionian camp. They were pushing their defensive lines forward, digging trenches and setting traps, as if they were the ones under siege. He marveled at how I compelled my citizen soldiers to perform such grueling labor without revolt. At noon, the Crotonian fleet commander Escamas, a radical and Milan's ally, arrived. Milan felt relieved, hoping to secure his support for a counterplan. No content. Just as Milan prepared to rest, a guard reported enemy movement. Dionian soldiers had advanced to within 100 meters of the north gate, clearing ground while protected by heavy infantry. The Crotonians watched curiously, feeling safe behind their moat and walls. Milan watched, trying to discern their intent. The soldiers drove tree trunks into the ground, lashing them together to form a 30-meter-long, 5-meter-wide wooden frame. "Are they building houses?" a soldier joked, drawing laughter. Then, they began stacking grain sacks filled with earth inside the frame. "They're making bread," another quipped. As the wall of sacks rose to match the height of the Crimissa city walls, Milan's face drained of color. "They're building a siege platform," his adjutant shouted. Panic spread among the Crotonians. The platform would allow Dionian peltasts to rain projectiles down on the defenders from a superior height. Milan broke into a cold sweat. The platform had to be destroyed. He decided to launch a surprise raid at dusk. Watching the Dionians dig trenches around the platform, Milan grew frustrated by their relentless caution. By dusk, the Dionians had established a small camp around the structure. Milan abandoned the raid, sensing the futility of the situation. The next morning, the Second Legion formed up in fish-scale formations, ladders in hand. I climbed the ramp to the platform, testing its stability with my feet. I had conceived the idea upon arrival, knowing the 3-meter walls were too low. The engineers had executed it perfectly. Looking down at the wall, I asked Epitines, "Can our archers reach them?" "With ease, Commander," Epitines replied. I nodded. Fire. Arrows and stones rained down. The siege had begun. Milan shouted, defend. The Crotonian heavy infantry raised their shields to cover their heads. Agilas, a village headman on the Sybaris plain, was a veteran who had lost a leg in the war against the Lacanians. No content, he had requested his land allotment be moved to the Krathis River to distance himself from painful memories. Initially seen as cold, his status as a veteran under me earned him the villagers' respect. Agilas was diligent, managing everything from tax collection to sanitation. His dedication earned him the villagers' love, giving him a new sense of purpose. With the men at war, Agilas had secured 30 state slaves to assist with the spring planting. The slaves worked hard, motivated by the promise of potential freedom on the League's anniversary. Agilas also provided comfort to the families of the soldiers. One day, after arranging for a carpenter in Thurii to fix a water wheel, he returned home. His slave greeted him. The mistress is sleeping. She didn't vomit today. Agilas felt a wave of gratitude to Hades for his new life and impending fatherhood. He had even bought a slave specifically to care for his pregnant wife. The slave offered him water. Agilas asked, is it boiled? He followed the medical advice of Hercules to prevent disease. He drank, but the door burst open. A boy rushed in. Uncle Agilas, I saw a ship at the beach. Armed men are coming ashore. Enemies. Agilas ordered the slave to take his wife to the safety of the Thurii plaza. The slave fled to comply. Agilas turned to the boy, Patroclus. Was anyone else there? Just me. Agilas asked, can you ride a mule? I've ridden everyone's, the boy admitted. Do you know the village to the south? Yes, I fought their kids. Take my mule and ride to them immediately. Tell them Agilas says. The enemy is here. Evacuate at once. Can you do it? I can, the boy nodded vigorously. Good lad. Agilas patted his head, then pulled the village seal issued by the Thurii magistrate from his tunic and pressed it into the boy's hand. If they don't believe you, show them this. Understood. The boy nodded again. Agilas led the gray mule from the pen, and the boy vaulted onto its back with ease. Remember, after delivering the message, wait for us at the Krathis River wooden bridge. Agilas instructed. I will, uncle. The boy flicked the reins, and the mule bolted out. Watching the boy, Agilas felt a measure of relief. Like many veteran mercenaries, he felt a duty to protect the alliance they had built with their own blood, rather than just his own village. Casting one last look at his home, Agilas limped toward the village square to ring the bell and order the evacuation. As Agilas led the villagers away, smoke rose behind them. While the women wailed, Agilas remained calm. Based on his raiding experience, he knew the enemy wouldn't pursue immediately, so he urged the villagers forward, though his fists were clenched in anger at seeing his new home destroyed. 3 villages destroyed, 15 dead, and not a single enemy captured. Felicius, you must do something. If this continues, the Victory Square will be overrun with refugees, and panic will grip the alliance. How can our citizen soldiers fight with this on their minds? Kunogurata, the magistrate of Thurii, demanded anxiously. Calm yourself, Kunogurata, Cornelius said, soothing him before turning to Felicius. The Crotonians are cunning. They land small groups of archers and javelin throwers from light ships along the coast. Our young men are at the front, leaving our villages vulnerable. By the time our troops arrive, these sailors have already fled back to their ships. With only 3 cohorts to guard both Thurii port and Amendalara, we are spread too thin. The problem must be solved, Kunogurata insisted. If we lack men, use the freemen. That is a sound idea, Felicius agreed. Thousands of freemen are idle at the port, and they are becoming restless. Yesterday, some even begged our soldiers for food. Empty, the freemen are out of grain. Kunogurata asked, startled. The war came too suddenly. Many didn't stock up, and the markets are empty, Felicius replied. Then use grain as pay to have them fight for the alliance, rather than cheapening our citizenship by shortening the probation period. If they could defeat the Crotonian army under the Archon, surely they can handle these raiding sailors. Kunogurata asked sharply. Felicius nodded. Certainly. My plan is to organize the freemen into squads of 100 to patrol the coast constantly. I will also station a cohort every 5 miles along the Thurii-Castiglione road, using scouts to link the patrols and the heavy infantry. Small groups will be repelled by patrols. Larger forces will be delayed until the heavy infantry arrives to crush them. Kunogarata's expression softened. That is a good plan. Though our grain supply will tighten, and Mercis will complain when we use the treasury to buy more from Heraclea, Cornelius sighed. War costs money. If the Archon wins, we will have it, Kunogarata said, his confidence in me growing since the victory at the Trionta River. Milan expected the Dionian army to assault the walls, but they merely stood in a tense standoff all morning. Aside from peltasts firing arrows and stones from siege towers, nothing happened until the light infantry grew too exhausted to continue. This eerie calm puzzled Milan. He was unaware that 5,000 Dionian soldiers and 3,000 Lao soldiers had entered the northern Croton plain to destroy crops and villages. I had strictly ordered them not to kill the civilians, only to intimidate and drive them away. The Crotonian council had advised villagers to flee to the city, but most stayed, thinking Milan held the line at Crimissa. Now, faced with the sudden arrival of the Dionian army, the populace fled south in panic. The Croton plain, fertile and strategically vital, was irrigated by the Neto and Tachina rivers. Croton, a powerful city-state, sat on the Gulf of Taranto with a deep-water port. Its historical conflict with Sybaris was driven by a desire for trade dominance in southern Italy. Between these rivers lay Isprostum, a city founded by the Bruttians. To the west, the Apennine Mountains were impassable, save for the Arvo River Valley, which led to the Kazinsa Plateau where the Bruttians originated. Fearing the strategic threat of a foreign city controlling the upper reaches of their rivers, Croton had conquered Isprostum a century prior, driving the Bruttians back to the plateau. Now, Isprostum served as a vital colonial fortress for Croton. News of the Dionian invasion caused panic in Croton, especially as the 3,000 Lao soldiers surged toward the Neto River.